The Vietnamese community in the United States is often known for its hard work and stability. Yet beneath that peaceful surface lie shocking criminal tragedies. Today, Vietnamese Case Files will compile a series of horrifying cases where brutality took many different forms. In New Orleans, a female police officer betrayed her oath and murdered her colleague, Ronald Williams, along with two Vu brothers during a violent robbery, ultimately leading to a death sentence. We will also revisit the extreme recklessness of a smash-and-grab crew in San Jose who drove a car straight into Kim Hưng jewelry and assaulted an 8-year-old man in less than a minute. Even more terrifying are the family tragedies. The Taunted case in San Jose, where 4 relatives newly arrived in the United States were killed over jealousy tied to immigration sponsorship. And the Henry Wynn case in San Bernardino, where 5 family members were brutally massacred over roughly $2,000, with the perpetrator even smearing a toothpaste-like substance on the victims' faces to intimidate them. We will look into a Minnesota murder case in which a wife was strangled by her husband with a phone charging cable out of jealousy after she demanded a divorce, as well as a heartbreaking case of collective suicide in San Francisco driven by overwhelming debt pressure. Each file is a painful reminder of the dark side of life, from domestic violence to organized crime, and the consequences of a hotel room door left accidentally unlocked in Las Vegas. Join us as we peel back the curtain and follow the path of justice as it unfolds. And if you enjoy crime investigation content and want to stay with us for the next cases, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you won't miss a single episode. Now, let's begin. At around 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, the 2nd of November 2025, in Elk Grove, California, local police received a series of frantic 911 calls reporting a shooting inside a bar on Elk Grove, Florin Road. Rapid response units were immediately deployed. When officers arrived, chaos unfolded before them. The music had stopped abruptly, tables and chairs were overturned, and dozens of patrons were screaming and rushing toward the exits. Several cars sped out of the parking lot as if trying to flee the scene of the tragedy. Amid the commotion, officers found 3 men collapsed inside the bar, all suffering from gunshot. First aid was administered on site, but 1 victim died at the scene due to the severity of his injuries. The remaining 2 were rushed to the hospital in critical condition. In addition, witnesses reported that there was another victim who had driven himself away from the bar immediately after the shooting and was being treated at a nearby hospital. The crime scene was quickly secured for investigation. Inside the bar, bullet casings were scattered across the floor, tables and chairs were pushed aside, and shattered glass covered the area. At the spot where the victims had fallen, large pools of blood marked a haunting scene. The body of the deceased victim was found lying on the dance floor, surrounded by bullet marks on the walls and long skid streaks across the ground, traces left behind as panicked patrons scrambled to escape. That same night, police began collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. Based on the number of shell casings recovered, investigators estimated that the shooter had fired approximately 4 to 5 rounds toward the victims. Bullet impacts on the walls and surrounding furniture indicated that the shots were fired from the area near the bar counter. Fortunately, the bar's security camera system captured part of the incident. The footage showed the crowded room erupting into chaos as people fled in all directions, and for a brief moment, the silhouette of a man holding what appeared to be a handgun passed through the frame. At the same time, 2 surviving victims, after being stabilized, provided crucial information about the suspect. They recalled that the shooter was a middle-aged man, heavy-set, and likely in his early 40s. An argument had broken out between him and one of the victims shortly before he pulled the trigger. Other witnesses also reported that the suspect had been accompanied by a young Asian woman at the time of the shooting. This detail immediately caught investigators' attention. Using all available clues, Elk Grove police worked with neighboring agencies to cross-reference the suspect's description with local criminal databases. In less than 2 days, a promising name emerged. Roderick Randall, 43, a resident of Sacramento. Randall had an extensive criminal record, and his appearance matched the witness descriptions almost perfectly. Forensic work at the scene also revealed Randall's fingerprint on a door near the shooting area, matched through DNA and biometric data from his prior arrest records. With this information, police conducted searches at all known addresses associated with Randall. However, he was nowhere to be found. Early indications suggested that Randall had deliberately gone into hiding immediately after the shooting and was likely moving between different locations to avoid detection. Randall's behavior after the crime showed he was exceptionally cunning. He powered off all personal electronic devices, avoided using credit cards, and made no bank transactions, effectively cutting off all digital trails and making technical tracking nearly impossible. Elk Grove Police, in coordination with Sacramento authorities, issued a nationwide warrant for Roderick Randall. His information was added to the federal criminal database, and the FBI was notified for potential support. Meanwhile, police set up 24/7 surveillance at Randall's known hangouts in case he attempted to return. Airports and state border checkpoints also strengthened passenger identity checks to ensure the fugitive would be detected if he tried to flee. Alongside the physical manhunt, police also prepared tactical plans in case of a direct confrontation with Randall. Because the suspect had a history of violent offenses and was believed to be armed, special response teams were kept on high alert, ready for the possibility that he might resist arrest aggressively. Meanwhile, Vietnamese language media outlets in California quickly began reporting on the case. Information about the shooting and the manhunt spread widely across Vietnamese American community channels. During a background check, investigators discovered that Randall had a Vietnamese American girlfriend named Tran Kim Thao, 25. This immediately reminded them of witness statements describing an Asian woman seen with the suspect inside the bar on the night of the shooting. This raised the possibility that she was present at the scene or had assisted Randall before, during, or after the attack. To clarify her involvement, police issued a summons for Kim Thao, but she failed to appear. Her sudden disappearance strengthened suspicions that she might be helping Randall evade capture or might even be fleeing with him. Faced with this situation, law enforcement decided to set a trap. They began monitoring Thao's communications, including phone activity and social media, while covertly watching locations she was likely to visit. On November 4, 2025, police detected Tran Kim Thao's phone signal in an area of Elk Grove. A tactical team was immediately dispatched. There, police successfully arrested Tran Kim Thao late that night, charging her as an accomplice in the bar shooting. She was taken to the police station for questioning and held in custody pending investigation. As of now, authorities have not released specific details about her role in the crime. What is known is that despite days of nonstop searching, Roderick Randall remains at large. Elk Grove Police, along with assisting agencies, continue to pursue every lead, no matter how small, to narrow down the search radius. Although the manhunt has faced numerous challenges, investigators believe that with an extensive surveillance network and strong community cooperation, Randall's capture is only a matter of time. While the investigation continued urgently, police simultaneously worked to identify the victims and notify their families. At the scene, identification documents confirmed that the man who died on site was Chhoun Kim Ka, 18, a Vietnamese-American youth from Chino Hills in Southern California. According to the Sacramento County Medical Examiner's Office, Kim Ka died from a gunshot wound to the chest that caused massive blood loss before he could be transported to the hospital. At the time of the shooting, he had just graduated high school and was on a trip to Northern California to visit friends. Those who knew him described Kim Ka as energetic, friendly, always smiling, and someone who brought positivity to everyone around him. The second critically injured victim was Vo Minh Phuc, 34, a resident of San Jose. He had been shot in the abdomen and suffered severe blood loss. Despite emergency surgery, his injuries were too extensive. Phuc passed away on November 6, 2025, 4 days after the shooting. His body was later transported back to San Jose for funeral arrangements. Neighbors described Phuc as a kind, soft-spoken, and exemplary man who had never been involved in any serious trouble. It remains unclear why he was at the Z-Town bar that night, but it is believed he may have been visiting Sacramento with friends for the weekend and stopped by the bar for entertainment. The remaining two victims were young men aged 25 and 26. They sustained injuries but were not in life-threatening condition and were discharged from the hospital a few days later. For privacy reasons, police did not release their names, but it is known that both were regular patrons of the Z-Town bar and were Asian American residents of the local area. One striking detail was that all 4 victims in the incident were either Vietnamese or of Asian descent. This raised a pressing question among the public. Was the shooter intentionally targeting this specific group? However, investigators have so far found no evidence that the attack was motivated by racial bias or community hatred. According to initial findings, Randall had no prior connection to Chhoun, Kim Ka, Vo Minh Phuc, or any of the other victims. The motive behind the tragedy is still under investigation, but it is believed to have stemmed from a minor confrontation inside the bar between Randall and one of the victims. Alongside the manhunt, police also worked to gather Randall's complete personal and criminal background. Through this process, the portrait of the gunman became clearer, a man with a long, violent criminal history. Roderick Randall, born around 1982, is an American citizen from Sacramento, California. Records from the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office and the California Department of Corrections reveal that Randall's criminal career began at a very young age. His first recorded conviction came in 2003, when he was about 21 years old, for recruiting a minor into illegal activities. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison and required to register as a sex offender, a lifelong label he would carry. Due to time served before trial and reported good behavior, Randall was released in late 2005 but remained under strict supervision. However, just 1 year later, in 2006, he reoffended, this time for burglary and theft. He was sentenced to another 6 years. During his incarceration, he repeatedly violated prison rules, delaying his release until 2009. Not long after returning to society, he violated probation again and was sent back to jail at the end of 2009, serving several more months before being released in 2010. By late 2012, he had officially completed his probation, seemingly having paid his debt to society. For a brief moment, it appeared as if Randall might finally step away from the criminal path that had defined his early adulthood. Later that same year, Randall became entangled in a coordinated shooting connected to gang operations in Sacramento, a case that once again placed him under the scrutiny of law enforcement and showed that his violent tendencies had not faded. Although he did not pull the trigger, he was charged as an accomplice and played a supporting role in a plan that resulted in 4 counts of attempted murder. The 2014 trial ended with a staggering 88-year prison sentence for Randall. Many believed this would finally put an end to his criminal life, but a legal turning point was about to arrive. In 2019, California enacted criminal justice reforms allowing reduced or overturned sentences for accomplices in homicide cases if they did not directly commit the killing or did not intend for anyone to be harmed. Randall's case qualified for review because he had been convicted purely as an accomplice, not as the shooter. After the appeals process, his 88-year sentence was overturned. In 2023, he was released early, becoming a prime example of someone granted a second chance under the reform law. However, his early release alarmed prosecutors and law enforcement as his extensive criminal history strongly indicated a continued pattern of violent behavior. As expected, Randall showed no intention of turning his life around after leaving prison. Instead, he returned to his old ways, violating the law whenever opportunities arose. According to multiple sources, between 2023 and 2025, Randall moved between several Northern California cities, worked odd jobs, and maintained connections with criminal circles in the region. Notably, at the age of 43, Randall began a relationship with a Vietnamese-American woman nearly 20 years younger, Tran Kim Thao, a U.S. citizen, living in the Sacramento area. Those who knew her described Thao as a soft-spoken, attractive young woman with no previous signs of instability. Her connection to a shooting case left many shocked. According to an unofficial source, Thao met Randall on social media in 2024 and was drawn to his charm and the life experience he portrayed. Their relationship escalated quickly despite the age difference in Randall's criminal past. In this case, Tran Kim Thao was believed to have assisted Randall to some degree. Some theories suggest she may have helped him bring a weapon into the bar or aided in hiding his whereabouts after the attack. It is also possible that she drove Randall away from the scene before the two later separated. So far, police have not disclosed specifics about Thao's actions, only confirming that she did not fire the weapon but played a significant supporting role. If proven in court, she could face many years in prison for her involvement. In summary, the background of Roderick Randall shows a dangerous repeat offender who disregarded the law and displayed a clear pattern of violence. His early release from prison, followed by immediate involvement in another crime, highlighted a violent nature that had never changed. As for Tran Kim Thao, regardless of her exact level of involvement, she ultimately became a key link in Randall's criminal chain. After the shooting, legal proceedings moved quickly, even though the primary suspect, Roderick Randall, remained at large. The first to face the justice system was Tran Kim Thao, who was charged as an accomplice to murder and an accomplice to aggravated assault in the bar shooting. The judge denied Thao's bail request, citing the extreme severity of the case and the risk that she might flee or obstruct the investigation if released. This meant Thao would remain in county jail until trial. While awaiting her court date, she spent her days in detention. According to some sources, she is under special monitoring due to signs of depression and emotional distress following her arrest. As for Roderick Randall, although he has yet to be captured, the charges and warrants against him have been fully prepared. The Sacramento County District Attorney's Office stated that Randall will face charges including first-degree murder for the deaths of Chhoun Kim Ka and Vo Min Phuc, attempted murder for the 2 surviving victims, and potentially additional charges for unlawful possession of a firearm, as he is a convicted felon prohibited from having a weapon. If arrested and convicted, Randall could face life in prison without parole or even the death penalty. And although California currently maintains a moratorium on executions, the law still allows death sentences in cases involving multiple victims. However, everything ultimately depends on capturing Randall. While he remains at large, the court may hold certain in absentia hearings to streamline federal warrant procedures, reducing delays once Randall is eventually apprehended. Meanwhile, prosecutors are preparing grand jury documents, with expectations to pursue the highest possible charges. The only legal defense he might attempt would likely center on mitigating factors such as intoxication or sudden provocation. But given his extensive criminal history and violent past, the chances of leniency are virtually non-existent. The public continues to follow the case closely. On social media, especially within the Vietnamese-American community, the story of a young Vietnamese woman, Tran Kim Thao, helping a killer target fellow Vietnamese spread rapidly, generating waves of outrage and disbelief. Some argue that Thao may have been psychologically manipulated by an older, dangerous criminal. However, many others firmly condemn her actions, emphasizing that regardless of the circumstances, complicity in a violent crime is unforgivable. In the media, the case drew intense public attention. Major U.S. outlets such as CBS and ABC News California continuously reported updates on the investigation and the ongoing manhunt. Notably, the fact that a criminal once sentenced to 88 years in prison had been released early, only to commit another violent offense, became a heated topic that sparked widespread outrage. Many newspapers began questioning California's criminal justice reform policies. Was there a legal loophole that allowed a dangerous offender like Randall to be released far too soon? The debate quickly spread across legal forums. Some experts argued that the Randall case was a clear example of the risks associated with excessive sentence reductions, emphasizing that the justice system must be more cautious with offenders who display persistent violent tendencies. On the other hand, supporters of criminal justice reform contended that one isolated case should not invalidate the humanitarian purpose of the law, as many individuals had genuinely rebuilt their lives after being given a second chance. What about you? What do you think truly motivated the shooter? And regarding the Vietnamese-American girlfriend, do you believe she played a deeper role in this case than what has been revealed? On the morning of the 8th of October 2025, the San Francisco Police Department received a call from a man named Robert Ochiltree, requesting a welfare check at the home of his younger brother, Thomas Ochiltree, located at 930 Monterey Boulevard. That afternoon, 2 patrol officers went to the residence and knocked, but no one responded. A growing sense of unease made Robert unable to sit still. Determined to find answers, he borrowed a pair of pliers, broke the small window pane on the door, reached in, and unlocked it. As the door swung open, a heavy, eerie stillness washed over him. Stepping cautiously inside, Robert was confronted with a scene that would haunt him forever. His brother's family lay unresponsive. Panicked, he screamed for help and dialed 911, begging officers to return immediately this time to investigate a catastrophic incident. But why had Robert suddenly decided to check on his brother's family? Had something happened earlier that hinted at impending danger? In fact, for nearly a week, Robert had been unable to contact Thomas. On Monday afternoon, October 6th, he stopped by Thomas's home to make sure everything was all right. This time, his sister-in-law, Paula Chhoun, answered the door, but her demeanor was unusual. She stepped outside onto the porch, closing the door behind her, never inviting him in as she normally would. She briefly explained that Thomas was away at a golf tournament in Monterey. Paula added that the lack of contact was because Thomas had lost his phone. The explanation sounded reasonable, but her distant behavior and the tightly shut curtains behind her planted a seed of suspicion in Robert's mind. The next day, his concern deepened drastically when he received a distressed message from Paula. In a text sent the evening of October 7, she urgently pleaded for help, saying Thomas was not himself and that she and the children were terrified. The short message left Robert shaken and deeply worried. Why was Paula suddenly so afraid? Was Thomas experiencing a crisis or exhibiting threatening behavior? Not wanting to delay another moment, Robert immediately contacted the San Francisco Police Department the following morning. Tragically, Robert himself would become the first person to witness the devastating scene inside the home. When investigators and paramedics arrived, they immediately recognized the seriousness and unusual nature of the case. Thomas Ochiltree and his two daughters were found on the bed in the master bedroom. Notably, the bodies of the two young girls had been carefully covered with blankets, as if someone had gently tucked them in after they had already passed. The room was tidy, with no signs of struggle. However, upon closer examination, investigators noticed swelling and minor bleeding around Thomas's head. One of the girls had faint pink foam around her mouth, a detail that immediately alarmed investigators, as it can indicate impaired breathing or possible ingestion of a harmful substance. The situation became even more troubling when officers followed the trail to the garage and discovered the fourth victim, Paula Chhoun, found suspended in the center of the garage. The once peaceful home was now filled with an overwhelming sense of tragedy. Initial observations showed no signs of forced entry. All doors were locked, valuable belongings remained untouched, and no clear weapon was found. With Paula discovered under such unusual circumstances, investigators began to consider the possibility that this was a murder-suicide involving the mother. As soon as the case was assigned, the homicide detail secured the entire house and deployed crime scene technicians to collect evidence. Every corner of the residence was examined for traces of toxins or medication. The investigators' top priority was determining the cause of death for the three victims in the bedroom, including whether they had been harmed and the timeline of their deaths. The San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office quickly took custody of the remains for autopsy, including toxicology tests on blood and stomach content samples. Although initial autopsy findings had not yet been released, investigators noted several important signs at the scene. The pink foam around Mackenzie's mouth suggested she may have consumed or been given some kind of substance before she died. Meanwhile, the bruising on Thomas's head indicated he may have suffered physical impact. Alongside the forensic work, detectives began interviewing witnesses and related individuals. Among them, Robert Ochiltree Thomas's older brother became the most critical witness. From Robert's account, it appeared Paula had been hiding something when she refused to let him enter the house on Monday afternoon. Her distressed text message the following night claiming Thomas was not himself and that she and the children were frightened made everything even more confusing. When police arrived on Wednesday, Thomas had already passed, showing no signs of resistance or harm toward anyone else. Paula's decision to text Robert for help suddenly became a puzzling clue. Was she hesitating before carrying out her actions, or was it an attempt to shift blame onto her husband? Police also interviewed neighbors for details about the family's recent behavior. Many said the Ochiltree family had become unusually withdrawn in recent months, rarely going outside or interacting with the neighborhood as they once did. One detail especially caught their attention. The trash bin in front of the Ochiltree home had remained on the curb all week instead of being brought in after Monday's collection day, a small but telling sign that something inside the home had gone wrong. Normally, either Thomas or Paula would bring the trash bin back into the yard the same day. But that week, by Wednesday, the bin was still sitting untouched on the curb. This detail suggested something may have gone wrong as early as Monday or even the weekend before. While reviewing clues, investigators also noticed another striking detail. The Ochiltree family had a small dog named Mango, which they regularly took to a nearby pet salon for grooming and ear dyeing. Strangely, Mango was nowhere to be found at the scene. This raised the question, did Paula take the dog somewhere safe before the tragedy? If true, it suggested she had planned ahead, calm enough to move the pet to safety before carrying out her intentions. As news of the case spread, the public and the media quickly speculated about the true cause of the tragedy. Reporters from the San Francisco Chronicle and the Standard began digging through public records and interviewing friends, co-workers, and neighbors of the Ochiltrees. Before long, they uncovered alarming financial troubles hidden behind the facade of a stable, middle-class family. Court and property records showed that the house at 930 Monterey Boulevard, where the tragedy occurred, had actually been foreclosed a year earlier due to defaulting on a $2.24 million USD loan. It turned out that in March 2022, Thomas and Paula had mortgaged their home to borrow a large sum likely to cover business investments. But within less than a year, by late 2022, they had become unable to make payments. By February 2024, the bank filed a lawsuit and moved to auction the property. In October of the same year, the house was purchased by a financial company for approximately $2.05 million USD. Even so, the Ochiltrees continued living in the home. Possibly due to pending legal procedures, they were allowed to stay temporarily while awaiting enforcement. For many people, living in a house no longer legally theirs would create tremendous psychological pressure, shame, fear of eviction, and constant uncertainty. On top of that, in January 2025, Paula Chhoun was sued by Discover Bank for more than $17,000 in unpaid credit card debt. 3 months later, the court ruled that she must pay the full amount plus fees, raising the total to more than $18,000. Digging deeper, investigators found that Paula Chhoun was the one who had signed most of the loans and business ventures. She had once been an ambitious entrepreneur, buying an old auto shop to turn it into Zentrum Motors, opening a Vietnamese iced coffee chain called Orbit Coffee, then purchasing a grocery store and converting it into Star Spirits, a liquor shop. Unfortunately, her business ventures collapsed, one after another in 2023, leaving behind enormous personal debt, bank debt, and tax debt. Records showed her company owed the state of California more than $47,000 in unpaid sales taxes. At this point, the financial motive became increasingly clear. The family was drowning in crisis, emotionally and financially. Mounting debts, a foreclosed home, and a bleak future may have pushed the couple to a breaking point. Because Paula was the primary borrower, the financial burden rested heaviest on her shoulders. During review, police also ruled out other theories, such as a collective suicide or an outside intruder. Every remaining clue pointed back to Paula. From the evidence available, investigators believed it was highly likely Paula had planned to end the lives of her family in a moment of overwhelming despair. She may have convinced herself that letting her husband and children go peacefully with her was preferable to facing bankruptcy, debt, and humiliation. Even so, while waiting for final forensic results, police maintained caution, referring to the case only as a suspicious multiple death incident. However, 2 internal sources told the press that investigators were leaning strongly toward the scenario in which the mother harmed her family before ending her own life. While a key part of the mystery now seemed clearer, the investigation was far from over. Detectives still needed to reconstruct the precise timeline of the final days and analyze Paula's mental state to fully understand this tragic case. So, before the tragedy unfolded, what kind of life did this family of 4 once have? Let's explore their story to understand the deeper layers behind this complex case. Thomas Ochiltree, 57, was an American painter and graphic designer. He worked on packaging designs for wine and craft beer brands, and he ran his own company, Ochiltree Design, Branding, and Packaging. For years, Thomas and his wife built several small businesses in the Bay Area, ranging from an auto repair shop to a cafe chain and a liquor store. Friends and colleagues described him as creative, gentle, and deeply devoted to his family. One example of that love came in 2013, when Thomas designed a wine label and named it after his daughter, a subtle way of weaving family affection into his creative work. On his professional LinkedIn page, Thomas proudly referred to Paula Trung as his business partner, showing that he saw her not only as his spouse, but also as a trusted collaborator in every project. As a father, Thomas Ochiltree was known for being tender, attentive, and devoted to his children. The couple had 2 daughters, Alexandra Ochiltree, 12, and Mackenzie Ochiltree, 9. Both were born and raised in San Francisco. Alexandra was a 7th grader at A.P. Giannini Middle School, and Mackenzie was in 4th grade at Sunset Elementary. Alexandra and Mackenzie were described as polite, quiet, and well-mannered, always greeting neighbors when they passed by. On the day of the tragedy, both girls were unexpectedly absent from school, which surprised their teachers because they were known for good attendance. The girl's mother, Paula Thi Trong, 53, was later identified as the one who caused the tragedy, before losing her own life as well. Paula was born in Vietnam during wartime and immigrated to the United States as a child. She married Thomas Ochiltree in 2006 San Francisco. Their marriage between a Vietnamese woman and an American man seemed happy and harmonious for many years. Paula was both a caring mother and a capable business partner. The two were often seen side by side, inseparable in work and in life. Friends still remember the Ochiltrees attending school events, farmers markets, and community festivals together. Former coworkers described Paula Trung as intelligent, decisive, and resilient. She was unafraid to dive into new business ventures, from automotive services to food and beverage to retail. In many of their joint projects, Paula was the visionary, the operator, and the leader. Interviews from past news articles show that Paula took great pride in her Vietnamese heritage. When she launched Orbit Coffee in 2019, she told Sprudge magazine that she wanted to create a place where people could enjoy Vietnamese iced coffee, a drink tied to her childhood. It was also a place where she wanted her daughters to experience the flavors of their roots. Paula was sociable and active in the business community, so dynamic that she once ran multiple businesses at the same time. Orbit Coffee, the Star Spirits liquor shop, and several rental properties. To many, she was the model of a modern woman, independent, strong, and ambitious. But good fortune did not last. After the COVID-19 pandemic, the local economy declined. Many small businesses in San Francisco were forced to close, and Paula's entire small business empire collapsed as well. In 2023, Paula was forced to shut down the entire Orbit Coffee chain, followed soon after by the failure of Star Spirits. Mounting loans grew far beyond her ability to repay. Once a respected entrepreneur, she fell into a severe financial crisis. The house was foreclosed, income dried up, and overwhelming debt left her emotionally and physically exhausted. It was likely this relentless series of setbacks that chipped away at Paula's stability, slowly setting the stage for the tragedy no one expected. Former associates recalled that in recent years, Paula gradually cut off contact with almost everyone. She stopped paying for accounting services and had not communicated with her tax specialist for nearly 5 years. These signs suggested she may have been slipping into a state of depression, despair, and shame over her financial collapse. Such negative thoughts may have accumulated over a long period and escalated in early October 2025. Investigators widely accepted the theory that Paula harmed her husband first, believing he was the only person capable of stopping her plan. Based on injuries found on Thomas's head, investigators concluded Paula may have used a hard object during a moment when he was unprepared, or she may have incapacitated him before the assault occurred. After her husband's death, Paula was left with her 2 young daughters. This is believed to be the most emotionally conflicted stage for her. Several signs indicated she hesitated for days before carrying out further actions. On Monday, October 6, both Alexandra and Mackenzie were absent from school. Investigators believe Paula may have given her children strong sedatives, leaving them unconscious. By the night of October 7, she appeared to have reached a devastating decision. Afterward, she gently covered her daughters with blankets, a heartbreaking gesture suggesting the profound emotional turmoil of a mother who had lost all hope. Once her husband and children were gone, Paula seemed to prepare for her own end. According to police assessment, her final action occurred midday on Wednesday, October 8th, only hours before Robert returned with officers. The entire tragedy is believed to have unfolded over roughly 48 hours, starting with Thomas, then the 2 children, before Paula's own death. Everything appeared meticulously arranged, as if she viewed it as a distorted escape from the family's crushing financial collapse. From a criminal psychology standpoint, the case shares characteristics with incidents in which a person in severe depression harms loved ones before ending their own life. In Paula's distorted state of mind, she may have believed that taking her children with her was a merciful alternative to leaving them facing poverty, the loss of both parents, and overwhelming debt. But to the outside world, it remains a horrific crime that took the lives of 3 innocent people. In this case, no criminal trial would ever take place because both the victims and the person responsible had passed away. Instead, the responsibility for establishing the truth fell entirely on investigators and, most importantly, the San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office through its official forensic findings. In this city, incidents involving a person harming family members before ending their own life are typically brought before a coroner's inquest to determine the sequence of events and the cause of each death, especially when children are involved. For Thomas's relatives, their stance was clear. They viewed Thomas and the 2 girls as completely innocent victims and placed full responsibility on Paula. Thus, the case closed without a courtroom trial. But the moral judgment from the public was harsh. Few felt any sympathy for Paula Chhoun, regardless of the desperation she may have faced. The tragedy deeply shocked the local community and received extensive media coverage across the United States. News reports spoke with sorrow and disbelief about a family of 4 who lost their lives inside their own home. In the days that followed, bouquets of fresh flowers and small offerings of fruit with incense sticks reflecting Vietnamese memorial traditions began appearing in front of the Ochiltree home in the heart of San Francisco. The San Francisco Standard and the San Francisco Chronicle later analyzed the root cause of the tragedy, the family's overwhelming financial collapse. They highlighted a painful truth. Although the Ochiltrees lived in an affluent neighborhood and appeared well off, behind closed doors was a mountain of debt and business failures. This illustrated the invisible face of poverty and financial strain that can exist even in the most glamorous neighborhoods. It also raised broader social questions. How excessive pressure to appear successful and the fear of losing face can break a person, especially within some immigrant communities where achievement is valued and failure is deeply stigmatized. At 2:30 a.m. on the 16th of February 2019, the stillness of a Clinton neighborhood was shattered by frantic screams and the sound of gunfire. Minutes later, 911 received a report of a domestic disturbance escalating into violence at a residence on Fox Hill Drive in the Huntcliffe subdivision. Officers from the Clinton Police Department were immediately dispatched to the scene. As soon as police vehicles arrived, the situation spiraled out of control. From inside the house, a man suddenly opened fire on the officers, forcing them to take cover and call for reinforcements. Under the barrage of bullets, frontline officers scrambled to secure themselves and establish a perimeter. A quick assessment suggested that multiple people might be held hostage inside. The urgent situation was reported to command staff, and SWAT along with supporting units were mobilized to handle the armed hostage scenario. Within minutes, more than 50 police vehicles, ambulances, and SWAT units surrounded the home before dawn. Loudspeakers blared instructions telling residents to stay indoors or evacuate to a safer location. Inside the house, no one knew exactly how many people were present or what condition they were in, except the armed suspect. The tense standoff dragged on for 12 hours as observation robots and crisis negotiators were deployed to communicate with the agitated man. But all they received were hostile refusals, along with confirmation that 2 young children were still inside. After negotiation attempts, the 2 children were eventually released unharmed, giving SWAT the opening to move in since the suspect showed no signs of surrendering. A sniper took position and was authorized to neutralize the target before the tactical team breached the house. With the situation finally contained, officers entered to a horrifying sight. The home was in disarray, blood splattered across the floor, and walls riddled with bullet holes under the harsh artificial light. 4 bodies were found scattered in different rooms. The victims, 3 women and 1 man, were all deceased before officers reached them. Initial observations offered clear clues. Each victim had suffered multiple gunshot wounds, indicating extreme brutality and intent. A semi-automatic 9mm handgun was found near the downed suspect, likely the murder weapon. These details led investigators to suspect an exceptionally violent family massacre. A new question quickly arose. If the perpetrator had killed his entire family, what was his motive? At first, the crime scene offered investigators only cold numbers: 4 bodies, 3 women, and 1 man found lifeless inside the house. They could not immediately determine who was who, as this Asian family had no close relatives or neighbors nearby who could identify them on the spot. In this small town, the Vietnamese community was not large, and the family kept a low profile, so confirming their identities posed initial difficulties. Police secured the home and carefully collected every possible identifying clue, from IDs found in the victims' purses to name plaques on family photos hanging on the walls. A crucial lead emerged when investigators examined the wedding photos and family portraits displayed in the living room. One showed a Vietnamese couple smiling on their wedding day, and another depicted them with 2 young girls. Comparing these images with information on the suspect's Facebook page, police determined that the groom in the wedding photo was Le Nam, the homeowner, and the man shot by police while the bride's face matched one of the deceased women. From this, police formed the hypothesis that the victims were all members of Nam's family, possibly his wife, sister-in-law, relatives, or mother-in-law. These assumptions needed formal verification through relatives or official documents. During the examination, forensic teams also collected the victims' fingerprints and compared them to databases and the documents recovered. Just 1 day later, on Sunday, February 17, the Hinds County Medical Examiner completed the autopsies and officially released the victims' identities. According to the report, the 4 victims were Lan Thi Mai Van 30, Le Thi Mai Van 28, Phung Min Le 28, and Cho Thi Van 65. Police immediately cross-checked these names with information linked to Le Nam. The results matched the initial hypothesis perfectly. Lan Thi Mai Van was Nam's wife, Le Thi Mai Van was his sister-in-law, Phung Min Le was the fiancé of the younger sister, and Cho Thi Van, age 65, was a babysitter and longtime family acquaintance. With the victims' identities confirmed, the investigation moved into the next phase. That phase was to understand the stories behind each victim and identify what circumstances led to the tragedy. Lan Thi Mai Van 30 Nam's wife was described as a gentle, family-oriented Vietnamese woman. She married Le Nam in 2013 and had 2 young daughters, ages 5 and 2. She and her husband built a small nail salon named Envy Nail in Hazelhurst. As the eldest sibling in her family, Lan was trusted by relatives and often served as the bridge, helping family members reunite in the United States. Customers at Envy Nail adored her, describing her as warm, caring, and making everyone feel at home. No one could have imagined that this cheerful woman would meet such a tragic end at the hands of her own husband. Next was Le Thi Mai Van, Lan's younger sister, the youngest of the 3 female victims and a key figure connecting everyone present that day. From here on, we will refer to the sisters simply as Lan and Lei for clarity. At 28, Lei was preparing for a major milestone in her life: marriage. She had just become engaged to her longtime boyfriend Phung Min Le and planned to hold the wedding in 2019. She was described as kind, somewhat quiet, had immigrated through family sponsorship, and worked alongside her sister at the nail salon. Lei had a very good relationship with her brother-in-law, Le Nam. She called him An, showing respect as one would toward an elder brother. That made her death especially heartbreaking. Her passing just before her wedding added another layer of tragedy. She and her fiancé had not even taken official wedding photos. Their engagement picture had to be used as her memorial portrait at the community vigil. The only male victim was Phung Min Le, 28 Le's fiancé. Known affectionately as Joey, he was a Vietnamese-American with a promising career at 28. At the time of the killings, Phung Min Le was a medical resident specializing in internal medicine at a hospital in Louisiana. He had been in a long-term, loving relationship with Le, supported wholeheartedly by both families. That fateful weekend, Phung drove from Louisiana to Mississippi to visit his fiancée and her family. No one knew it would be the last trip of his life. Those who knew him described him as intelligent, gentle, and deeply devoted to Le. The fact that a promising young doctor was killed in a domestic violence massacre left the public especially shaken. Phung Min Le had no blood relation to Le Nam, yet he was the only male victim. This led to many theories. Perhaps he tried to protect his fiancée and her family during the conflict and was killed in the process? Regardless of the exact cause, the death of Phung Min Lay was a tremendous loss, not only to his family, but also to the medical community he worked in. And the final victim, also the oldest, Cho Thi Van, around 65 years old, was a trusted family acquaintance from Vietnam. She had lived in the United States for many years and was highly trusted by the Le Nam family. She often cared for the two young daughters while the couple worked at the nail salon. Neighbors saw her daily, but rarely interacted with her due to the language barrier. Cho Thi Van spoke almost no English. At her age, she should have been enjoying a peaceful retirement, yet she lost her life tragically in a domestic violence incident in a foreign land. 4 people with 4 different life stories, yet their fates became intertwined on one horrific night. They all shared one thing in common. They were kind people, loved by friends and by the Vietnamese community. Their relationship with the perpetrator, Le Nam, was clear. They were his family and close loved ones. This only deepened the mystery. What motive could drive Le Nam to kill those dearest to him? To answer that question, investigators had to look closely at Le Nam himself and the events leading up to the massacre. What police and the media later discovered about Le Nam was completely opposite to the terrifying image he projected that morning. Born in 1984, Le Nam was originally from the fishing village of An Bang in Vinh and Commune Phu Vang District, Thua Thien, Hue Province, today part of Hue City. Many people from An Bang later immigrated to the United States and built new lives there, including Nam's family. According to neighbors, Nam often said his family moved from a bigger city to Clinton around the early 2010s. Le Nam had a completely clean record, no criminal history, and held a stable job managing the nail salon with his wife. Their household situation was financially comfortable, which was why Nam and Lan were able to bring Lan's younger sister, Lay, and Cho Thi Van to the US to live with them shortly afterward. In the eyes of those around him, Le Nam was a devoted family man, gentle, polite, and friendly. He often bought pastries and coffee for customers as a gesture of hospitality. Within the Vietnamese friend circle, Nam had no bad reputation. He was known to occasionally help others. His medical records showed no sign of mental instability. He lived a healthy lifestyle, did not use illicit substances, and only drank occasionally for social or business purposes. So what could push a man who seemed to embody the ideal husband to kill the very people he loved? Immediately after the standoff ended, the Clinton Police Department, in coordination with the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, launched a full-scale investigation. Although Le Nam had been shot and killed at the scene, the investigation remained crucial to reconstruct the incident, determine his actions, and uncover the motive behind the massacre. The home on Fox Hill Drive became the center of an extensive forensic operation lasting several days, with crime scene technicians moving in and out continuously to collect evidence. Investigators initially determined that this was a brutal domestic violence incident that escalated into a hostage situation. There were no signs of an outside intruder. All evidence pointed to the homeowner, Le Nam, as the primary suspect. The chaotic scene, with numerous shell casings found around the bodies, helped investigators map out the shooting positions and bullet trajectories. All victims had been shot at close range, indicating that the perpetrator fired directly and decisively. The TV and lights were still on, and dishes remained on the dining table, signs that everyday life had been abruptly interrupted. There was no suicide note or written document left behind, nor any evidence of drug use, aside from a few empty beer cans near where Nam barricaded himself. These details suggested the crime may not have been premeditated, but instead triggered by sudden rage or emotional agitation. Forensic results indicated that the victims died around the same time between midnight and early morning on February 16, matching the time frame when police first received the emergency call. The scene showed no signs of prolonged struggle, implying that the victims were likely taken by surprise and had no chance to defend themselves. The forensic team also confirmed that all shell casings came from Nam's 9mm handgun, conclusively identifying him as the sole perpetrator with no accomplices. Alongside this, police extracted body cam footage from SWAT officers involved in the standoff. The footage documented parts of the tense 12-hour confrontation. Notably, when SWAT deployed a surveillance robot inside Le Nam's home, it recorded a chilling scene. The suspect sitting calmly on the living room floor near a window, cigarette in hand. Weapon at his feet, and 4 lifeless bodies nearby. According to the police report, Lenam even raised his middle finger at the robot, continuing to provoke law enforcement. Meanwhile, officers began interviewing neighbors. One neighbor, Al Morrison, provided a crucial lead. He said police had visited the home several times before to resolve disputes, suggesting that family conflict had been ongoing. His testimony aligned with police records. There had been at least 2 previous 911 calls to this address involving marital arguments and domestic disturbances. Although none were severe at the time, they showed the presence of long-standing tension in the household. This may be the key to understanding the motive. Could the massacre have been the breaking point of a prolonged string of domestic conflicts? Following that, due to the extreme severity of the case, the FBI also joined to support the investigation, particularly in criminal behavior analysis. Experts reviewed Lenam's behavioral patterns and classified the case as a family annihilator scenario, a term for perpetrators, typically middle-aged men, who kill their entire families, often with histories of controlling behavior or domestic violence. In many such cases, the perpetrators experience psychological pressure or life disruptions that trigger an explosive outburst. Comparing this pattern with Lenam, although he had no major criminal history, the prior police visits reflected early signs of violence. This assessment placed the motive within the broader context that Lenam may have been someone skilled at hiding his true emotions, outwardly friendly, helpful, and sociable, but harboring dark and distorted thoughts. When these internal tensions reached a breaking point, he erupted and carried out the violent acts. This theory seemed plausible, but police still could not determine an exact motive. Marital conflict, jealousy, or financial pressure all remained unclear because the perpetrator was killed without leaving any explanation. To clarify further, the investigation shifted toward reviewing the family's financial situation and found that the nail salon was stable, with no significant debt. Regarding the marital situation, friends and relatives consistently stated that Lenam deeply loved his wife and children, and that Lon had shown no signs of wanting a divorce. After ruling out all other possibilities, investigators were left with one remaining explanation. Nam may have felt increasingly uncomfortable with his wife's extended family living in the same home, leading to prolonged tension. However, with all individuals directly involved in the case deceased, this hypothesis can never be fully confirmed. Although the exact motive could not be clearly established, investigators, through evidence collection and assistance from criminal psychology experts, were able to partially reconstruct the events leading up to the massacre. On the evening of Friday, the 15th of February 2019, after closing the Envy Nail Salon, the family Lenam, his wife Lan, his sister-in-law Lei, her fiancé Phung Min Lei, and Cho Thi Van all returned to their home in Clinton. They shared a warm early-year family dinner, chatting happily. Only Lenam remained unusually quiet, something dark slowly rising within him. Near midnight, Cho Thi Van put the 2 young girls to bed. In the living room, the adults continued talking until about 2 a.m., when an argument erupted. Years of suppressed anger inside Nam exploded. He reached for his 9mm handgun and began a brutal rampage. The first shot struck his wife at close range in the living room. Lan collapsed to the floor, blood soaking through her nightgown. Le screamed in terror. Phung Min Le rushed forward to stop his future brother-in-law, desperately trying to calm him, but was shot twice in succession. Seeing the 2 people she loved fall to the floor, Lei begged for mercy, but Nam continued pulling the trigger. In less than a minute, 3 beloved family members lay dead. The air grew thick with the smell of gunpowder. At that moment, Cho Thi Van rushed out of the children's bedroom, horrified by the scene. She tried to retreat to protect the 2 girls, but she too could not escape Nam's frenzy. Everything happened too fast under the cold-blooded rage of the gunman. Only when his 2 daughters woke up crying did Lenam momentarily regain control, but he could not face the horror he had created. The clock showed 2:30 a.m., and police were already arriving in response to an emergency call. One officer approached the door and asked about the situation inside. Nam slipped back into instability, pointed his weapon at the officers, and fired, forcing them to retreat, take cover, and call for backup. Nam slammed the door shut, locked it, pulled the curtains closed, and entered full barricade mode. He reloaded his gun and moved his daughters to a safer spot inside the house. Nam knew he could not escape, but lacked the courage to end his own life, choosing instead to go down in a violent standoff. Outside, reinforcements arrived. Clinton police were joined by the Hinds County Sheriff's Office and the Mississippi Highway Patrol SWAT team. The neighborhood was locked down, and curious residents were pushed back for safety. As dawn approached, the flashing blue and red lights of dozens of police vehicles turned quiet Fox Hill Drive into a scene resembling a war zone. Many later said they had never seen anything like it in their lives. Around 5 a.m., after police established their formation, a crisis negotiator was brought in to initiate contact with Nam, but he refused, forbidding police from entering. The negotiator attempted to prolong conversation in hopes of persuading him to release the hostages and surrender, as at this point, no one yet knew the condition of the 4 people inside. Nam did not hide anything, bluntly stating that the victims were no longer breathing. This admission left the police momentarily stunned. They shifted strategy, focusing on negotiating the release of the 2 girls and preparing for a tactical breach. The phone rang repeatedly as both sides continued negotiating. By around 10 a.m., seeing his daughters frightened and hungry, Nam finally softened. He demanded that police retreat to a distance and then slowly walked his 2 daughters toward the door. By 11 a.m., after cautiously surveying the surroundings, Lanam cracked the door open and allowed his 2 daughters to step outside and run toward police. The sight of the children being rescued safely brought a collective sigh of relief. They were immediately taken to a secure location for medical evaluation. Fortunately, both girls were only traumatized and had no physical injuries. Now, inside the home, only Lanam and the 4 lifeless bodies remained. Police were eager to breach, but they knew Nam was still armed. Negotiators continued urging him to surrender, but Nam was determined to fight until the end. After another hour passed, the incident commander authorized stronger tactics. First, they negotiated to send in the surveillance robot. The footage transmitted from inside left many officers chilled. Near the bodies, the rescue team saw Nam sitting in the middle of the room, raising his middle finger tauntingly and even firing shots at the robot, causing the camera feed to cut off. That action was the final straw. The patience afforded to the suspect had run out, and the rescue team was forced to implement the final plan: neutralize the gunman. As a last warning, they deployed tear gas. If Nam refused to surrender, he would expose his position. At 12:30 p.m., SWAT officers were ordered to prepare for a full breach. A sniper was positioned at an optimal angle, awaiting the command. And at the moment Nam moved toward the window to assess the situation, a single shot rang out. The sniper had taken the shot, penetrating the window and striking Nam in the chest, immediately incapacitating him. Orders were shouted, and SWAT teams stormed the house from 2 directions, one group breaking through the front door, the other entering through a window. They quickly scanned the scene, restrained the wounded Nam, and checked if anyone inside was still alive. Once the all-clear signal was given, medical teams and additional officers entered. After 12 exhausting hours, the intense standoff was finally over. Lanam was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but despite doctors' efforts, he succumbed to blood loss. With the sole suspect dead, the case closed without any courtroom trial and without any clear explanation for what triggered the tragedy. It left the public deeply haunted. At the time, the story drew significant media attention because it involved not only multiple fatalities, but also an immigrant Vietnamese family, a perspective rarely featured in American headlines. On television, images of the bullet-riddled home, the overturned furniture, and the memorial flowers and candles placed outside stirred emotional reactions across the community. This incident also left behind profound lessons. Above all, it highlighted the urgent issue of domestic violence, a crisis that can occur anywhere behind the closed doors of homes that appear peaceful from the outside. For many Vietnamese families who follow the belief, show the good, hide the bad, perhaps the signs of conflict and violence between Lanam and his family had surfaced long before, but were concealed out of pride, fear for the children, or worry for their reputation, until the tragedy finally erupted. San Jose, California, on September 5th, 2025. Inside a small jewelry shop called Kim Hưng, located in the heart of Little Saigon, an area with a large Vietnamese community in East San Jose, it was already late afternoon. The owner, an 88-year-old Vietnamese elder, and his son were getting ready to close. The day's transactions were done, and valuable items were being moved into the safe. The roll-up gate was about to come down. It looked like an ordinary day was ending peacefully. But just seconds later, everything was turned upside down. From the street outside, a gray Ford Explorer SUV suddenly accelerated and charged straight toward the shopfront. The engine roared across the quiet lot. Then, bang, the vehicle slammed into the front glass with tremendous force. The entire storefront shattered. A large display case was shoved deep into the interior. Before the father and son could even process what was happening, they were standing in the middle of chaos, the ceiling still trembling from the impact. At that moment, a group of masked individuals in dark clothing and gloves rushed inside. There were no words, no hesitation. They moved like they were executing a well-rehearsed plan. The son tried to reach his father, but he couldn't. One of the robbers threatened him with a firearm, forcing him to freeze. Meanwhile, the others swung sledgehammers into the glass cases, the cracking blasts sounding almost like gunshots. Necklaces, gold rings, bracelets, and gemstones were swept up in an instant. One robber yanked a valuable item right out of the elderly man's hands. Another shoved him to the floor, despite the fact that he was old enough to be their grandfather. The son was kept at gunpoint, pressed into a corner, too afraid to move. The power imbalance was absolute. In under 40 seconds, they finished smashing and grabbing, stuffed the stolen jewelry into black trash bags they had brought, and rushed back out. They left the store, cut across the parking lot, and jumped into at least 4 other cars waiting nearby, disappearing into San Jose's heavy traffic. The SUV used for the initial smash and grab was abandoned behind them, sitting still like an emptied shell of evidence. San Jose has seen its share of jewelry store robberies, but this one, carried out in less than a minute, in broad daylight, in a busy neighborhood, showed just how reckless and organized this professional crew was. What made them target Chhoun? Was it a random hit, or the result of weeks of surveillance and scouting? And where would all that stolen gold and jewelry end up? 10 minutes after the robbery, the store owner's granddaughter unexpectedly stopped by and witnessed the horrifying scene. The 88-year-old man was in severe shock in a corner of the shop, his feet smeared with blood after stepping on shattered glass. Terror had pushed him close to delirium as he kept repeating in Vietnamese, "Oh my God, are they gone yet?" Panicking, she immediately called both the police and an ambulance. Within 5 minutes of receiving the call, patrol officers from the San Jose Police Department, SJPD, arrived at the scene. What greeted them was devastation. The entire storefront had been smashed in, the doorframe and security roll-up gate were bent out of shape, and broken glass was everywhere. The perpetrator's SUV was gone, leaving a gaping hole right at the entrance. Inside, the glass jewelry display cases were shattered. Fragments of glass, twisted frames, and scattered jewelry littered the floor. Dusty airbag residue and a faint burnt metal smell still hung in the air. Investigators quickly secured the scene and assisted paramedics in providing first aid. The elderly owner was still on the floor, but had lost consciousness, with a weak pulse after suffering a stroke from the impact and extreme psychological shock. He had multiple cuts on his hands and head from the shattered glass, and blood had soaked a section of the floor. The other victim, his son, fortunately did not sustain serious physical injuries, but he was badly shaken. An ambulance rushed the elderly man to the hospital in critical condition, accompanied by his family. Meanwhile, investigators began canvassing the shop for clues. They noted long skid marks leading into the store, indicating the vehicle had accelerated to ram the entrance. A large sledgehammer dusted with shattered glass had been left behind near the counter, likely dropped by the robbers as they fled in haste. The most important lead at the scene was the store's security camera system. Detectives quickly seized the DVR connected to multiple cameras inside and outside the shop. During an initial check, they were relieved to see the entire robbery had been clearly captured from multiple angles. The chilling footage showed everything. The SUV smashing through the front, more than a dozen dark-clad figures rushing in, smashing display cases, scooping up gold and jewelry, and sprinting back out, all in under a minute. The cameras also captured a tall robber pointing a gun at the owner's son to keep him still, while another shoved the elderly owner to the floor. Watching the video, investigators couldn't help but feel both anger and horror at the robber's cruelty. Even seasoned officers shook their heads. It's rare to see someone nearly 90 years old assaulted so violently in a property crime. When the footage was later released, it sent shockwaves through the public. San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan said he was outraged and pledged that police would do everything possible to bring the robbery crew to justice. Immediately after the robbery, the San Jose Police Department launched a special task force, deploying its most seasoned investigators from the SJPD robbery unit. Based on the scene and the surveillance footage, authorities assessed that this was an organized robbery carried out with highly professional tactics. Investigators also determined that more than 10 suspects took part in the attack, moving with extreme speed and reckless boldness. Using a vehicle to ram straight through the storefront was a rare, audacious method, evidence that the operation had been carefully planned. The scene yielded very little biological evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, because the robbers wore gloves throughout. However, high-quality security footage provided crucial early leads, including their clothing style, body builds, the weapons they used, and the vehicles involved in their escape. One of the getaway vehicles was identified as a black Jeep Grand Cherokee, a large model with a powerful engine. After checking databases, police found that a black Jeep Grand Cherokee had been stolen from a parking lot in San Jose just one day before the robbery. It was highly likely this was the same vehicle used in the crime. This lead shifted investigators' focus toward professional car theft crews operating in the area. At the same time, witness statements were collected in detail. The store owner's son, who was inside during the robbery, recalled that the crew consisted of more than a dozen individuals, mostly young, dressed alike, black hoodies, gloves, and face masks, speaking American accented slang. One suspect with a gun shouted threats, warning he would shoot if the son resisted. Others used sledgehammers and hard objects to smash every glass display case within seconds, stealing jewelry estimated to be worth tens of thousands of USD, mainly 18-karat gold and diamonds. The entire incident lasted less than 60 seconds. The witness added that before fleeing, one robber knocked the elderly owner down and kicked him hard while he was on the floor, and then the group ran from the scene. This showed not only speed, but clear role assignment. Some stayed outside as lookouts, one controlled the victims, and the rest focused on grabbing the merchandise. Several people from nearby businesses reported hearing a loud crash, like an explosion. When they rushed outside, they saw a black SUV and 2 to 3 other cars speeding away, but no one could make out the license plates. These small details, pieced together, helped investigators form an overall picture. A large, well-prepared crew likely escaped in multiple directions. Given the severity of the case, more than 100 officers from at least 5 different units, including the FBI and police from neighboring cities, were brought in to investigate and hunt the suspects, along with 4 SWAT teams on standby. Detectives split into multiple teams across the Bay Area to gather leads, from traffic camera footage along suspected escape routes, to mobile phone location data near the crime scene, to checks of black market gold channels to see whether the stolen items were being fenced. The round-the-clock effort began to pay off. Just 1 week after the robbery, police obtained traffic camera footage showing the suspected black Jeep Grand Cherokee heading east immediately afterward. That trace led them to the city of Manteca in Central California. There, officers found a Jeep burned down to its frame on an empty lot. Although the vehicle was burned to destroy evidence, police were still able to recover several key pieces of proof. First, the VIN matched the Jeep that had been reported stolen the day before. More importantly, investigators found a latent fingerprint on the interior rearview mirror, likely left behind by the driver. That print was immediately run through the federal fingerprint identification system. The result matched an 18-year-old named Jacques Samuel, who had a prior record for car theft in Oakland. This first solid lead greatly energized the task force. Still, going from one identified person to an entire crew was a long road. Police began covert surveillance on Jacques Samuel to trace his associates. Around the same time, the San Francisco Bay Area was shaken by another brazen robbery. On September 22, 2025, about 20 armed robbers stormed Heller Jewelry in San Ramon, roughly 60 kilometers from San Jose, smashed display cases, and stole multiple pieces of jewelry in broad daylight. The pattern strongly resembled the Kim Hưng case, a large group, weapons involved, and multiple getaway cars staged nearby. Police immediately considered the possibility that both robberies were carried out by the same crew. If so, it meant their boldness was escalating fast. The good news was that no one was injured in San Ramon. Even more fortunate, San Ramon police managed to pursue the suspects and intercept several of them as they fled toward Oakland and Dublin. San Ramon police quickly shared the information with San Jose. And one of the detained suspects was Jacques Samuel, the same man whose fingerprint had been found on the burned-out Jeep in Manteca. His arrest in the San Ramon robbery became a major breakthrough for the Kim Hưng case. San Jose investigators immediately traveled to interview Jacques Samuel at the Dublin jail, Alameda County. At first, Jacques denied involvement, but faced with the fingerprint match and the San Ramon robbery video, he was forced to provide leads on his accomplices. Samuel admitted he took part in the Kim Hưng robbery on September 5th as a runner, meaning he rushed in to grab and scoop up jewelry. He then provided the nicknames of several of the group's leaders. Based on his statements, San Jose police gradually identified 6 additional suspects tied to the Kim Hưng robbery. Arrest and search warrants for the 7 suspects were approved one after another, marking the start of a dramatic takedown phase. On September 22, 2025, Dublin police, Alameda County, formally arrested Jacques Samuel, already in custody for the San Ramon case, on allegations tied to the Kim Hưng robbery pending transfer to Santa Clara County. Next, on September 30th, 2025, a major operation was carried out almost simultaneously at 4 different locations to capture the remaining suspects. Angel Herrera, 21, was arrested in Pacifica. Tadisha Mayfield, 31, was taken into custody in San Leandro. Zachary Blue Gordon, 23, was arrested in San Jose, and Tom Dunnigan, 19, was captured while hiding in Manteca. By October 2nd, 2025, the final 2 suspects, Cisco Lutu, 18, and Amari Green, 21, were also arrested when police raided a home in Antioch. The arrests were swift and orderly, with no significant resistance, thanks to the element of surprise and tight coordination among agencies. During searches of the suspects' residences, police seized a large amount of stolen property and other key evidence. In particular, at Tadisha Mayfield's home in San Leandro, officers found a Glock 19 handgun with a fully loaded magazine. Investigators believe this may have been the firearm used to threaten victims inside Kim Hưng. Police also recovered several gold bracelets and diamond rings that had not yet been fenced, matching items reported stolen from Kim Hưng. More seriously, at the Antioch hideout linked to Cisco Lutu and Amari Green, officers seized a large quantity of illegal drugs along with packaging materials, signs that the group was also involved in unlawful narcotic sales. This discovery opened a new investigative angle. The crew may have used proceeds from selling stolen jewelry to buy drugs for distribution, or conversely, committed robberies to finance a drug operation. All seized items were sealed as evidence for later criminal proceedings. At a press conference on October 3, 2025, San Jose police officially announced the arrest of 7 key suspects connected to the Kim Hưng jewelry robbery. Deputy Chief Brian Schaab stated, 7 criminals, people who beat an elderly man, destroyed a family business, and terrorized an entire community, are now behind bars. He emphasized, this wasn't a crime of hardship or desperation. It was a violent, organized robbery, part of a smash and grab pattern that's spreading across the Bay Area and throughout the state. However, the investigation is not stopping there. Police believe the crew may be linked to multiple other jewelry store robberies in the region. Investigators say some members were also involved in a recent robbery at a jewelry store in Milpitas, as well as the brazen San Ramon robbery on September 22, 2025. For that reason, San Jose police are working with neighboring jurisdictions to broaden the investigation and map this criminal network across the wider region. Notably, the publicly released suspect profiles show the group was very young. Most were only 18 to 21 years old at the time of arrest. They lived in multiple cities, forming an unusually multi-city structure. This suggests they were not a typical local street crew, but potentially part of a larger network connected through social media or underground contact. Tadisha Mayfield, 31, was the oldest suspect and the only woman in the group. She had previously been arrested for auto theft and receiving stolen property several years earlier, but received probation. Investigators believe she may have served as a connector within the crew, as she reportedly had prior ties to some of the other suspects. The remaining members also had troubled backgrounds. Some had minor records from their juvenile years, such as petty theft or drug possession. It appears they came together primarily to make illegal money, forming a mobile robbery crew that specifically targeted jewelry stores. However, investigators have not found evidence so far that any member belonged to a traditional organized crime gang. This appears to be a newer type of criminal crew, assembled temporarily to pull off a major job, split the loot, and then disperse. According to early statements, they chose Kim Hưng simply because they thought it would be an easy score. The shop was fairly small, with no security guard. The owner was elderly, and the security system wasn't particularly modern. Everything about it made it an ideal target in the eyes of people short on cash. That's why the group's motive was clear: greed and profit. The black market could help them quickly fence the gold and jewelry, bringing in tens of thousands of USD in cash to split among themselves. And even though most of the crew were teenagers, investigators described them as extremely aggressive and brazen, willing to use excessive violence when necessary. They believed that by acting so boldly and recklessly, police would never be able to identify everyone involved. But reality proved the opposite. Law enforcement tracked them down quickly, and the justice system will punish those who spread terror through the community. As of now, the legal process is still ongoing. The Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office said it would pursue tough charges against the group, including armed robbery, assault on an elderly victim causing serious injury, conspiracy to commit a felony, unlawful weapon offenses, and possibly drug trafficking charges as well, based on the cocaine that was seized. Each charge carries heavy potential penalties, and if convicted on all counts, the defendants could face decades behind bars, possibly even life sentences for some. At the October 3rd press conference, District Attorney Jeff Rosen stressed that his office would do everything possible to deliver justice for the victims and deter this kind of crime. He said, "When small businesses are attacked, our entire community is attacked. These criminals won't be facing just a few isolated shopkeepers. They'll be facing the police chief, prosecutors, the mayor, and me. And when we're attacked, we will fight back all the way." That hardline statement signaled a fierce legal battle ahead for the Kim Hưng jewelry store robbery crew. In the first days after the arrests, the suspects' attitudes varied. Some stayed defiant, silent, or evasive, while others, like Jacques Samuel, showed some willingness to cooperate in hopes of leniency. The Santa Clara County Superior Court quickly held initial arraignment hearings for each suspect. The judge described the case as extremely serious, organized, and violent. So most of the suspects were held without bail due to concerns they might flee or pose a danger to the public. The defendants will go through the full criminal process, from preliminary hearings and plea negotiations to a full trial if they do not plead guilty. With strong evidence, surveillance video, weapons, statements, and recovered property, along with intense attention from officials, many believe the upcoming court proceedings will result in sentences that match the severity of the crimes. As for Kim Hưng jewelry, the family estimates the robbery caused losses of up to $50,000. But more important is the owner's health. The 88-year-old suffered a stroke after the fall and was unable to answer questions when his granddaughter arrived. Thankfully, because emergency care came in time, he survived, was treated at the hospital, and returned home after 5 days. However, he remained terrified and traumatized, and even considered closing the shop after the ordeal. Notably, the robbery happened just days after financial advisory firm SmartAsset ranked San Jose as the safest city in the United States. While that assessment can't be dismissed entirely, the reality is that dark spots still exist. According to statistics, from March 2025 to early October 2025, California alone saw around 30 violent robberies targeting jewelry stores, including 16 brazen smash and grab cases like this. Offenders often exploit California's relatively lenient approach to theft, along with the advantage of acting in large groups and moving lightning fast to evade punishment. In the San Jose area specifically, a string of organized robberies has left residents and small business owners deeply worried. This reality has forced local authorities to speak out. City leaders have called for stronger security measures and tougher crackdowns, stressing that these violent attacks on small businesses are seriously threatening the community's sense of safety. Many owners of jewelry shops, nail salons, and spas in the area have proactively upgraded security by installing reinforced metal gates, impact-resistant glass, and camera systems that send real-time alerts to their phones. Others have hired armed security guards to stand watch, especially during peak hours. San Jose police have also increased patrols in Vietnamese commercial districts to reassure the public. On the morning of the 10th of August 1995, San Bernardino police received an urgent call reporting that 5 members of a single family had been found dead under suspicious circumstances. Earlier that day, the sister of Henry Nguyen, one of the victims, had repeatedly called him, but no one picked up. The phone rang for a long time before the line suddenly connected, and a small, trembling voice answered. It was young Dennis, the youngest child. The boy burst into tears, saying that his mother was gone. His aunt's heart dropped instantly. She immediately asked relatives and neighbors to rush over and check on the family. A neighbor stood at the front door, calling into Henry's house, but heard nothing except the terrified cries of the child inside. Fearing the worst, she decided to break a window to get in. The moment the door gave way, a horrifying scene appeared. Little Dennis, covered in blood, ran toward her, begging for help before collapsing beside the cold body of his mother. Panicked, the neighbor quickly carried him outside, while others urgently called 911. Moments later, sirens echoed sharply through the once quiet neighborhood. When officers finally arrived, they were met with a heartbreaking scene of devastation and chaos. 3 bodies were discovered in the living room. Henry Nguyen, his wife, and 1 0-year-old son, David. The older children, Doong, Hoang, and Daniel, were discovered in a back bedroom. Dark blood pooled across the floor, splattered on the walls, and soaked into the furniture, creating a chilling tableau that investigators struggled to comprehend. At the scene, police recovered 14 9mm Winchester casings and 1 S&B casing. Scattered from the living room to the bedrooms, the killer fired continuously throughout the house. Preliminary autopsy findings showed Henry had been shot twice, 1 bullet at point-blank range into his skull, another through his chest, and he had 4 shallow cuts on the back of his neck, suggesting he may have been threatened with a knife before being killed. His wife, Trinh Nguyen, lay face down near him, shot once in the thigh and twice in the head at extremely close range. The force of the shots was so strong that 2 of her teeth were found next to her body. A strange layer of white powder covered around her nose, mouth, and eyes, resembling toothpaste. And a partially squeezed tube was found discarded beside her. Nearby, Yen's purse had been completely emptied, and several drawers and compartments throughout the home were left wide open, suggesting the killer had searched for valuables every corner. Henry's 2 sons had also been fatally shot. Both suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Their daughter Doan had a bullet wound through her hand, likely from a desperate, instinctive attempt to block the shot. The only surviving witness, little Dennis Nguyen, was rushed to the hospital. The boy had a gunshot wound through his hand, but fortunately it was not life-threatening. After the treatment, the boy was placed in the care of relatives. Investigators also collected other important clues at the house, including a rubber glove found in the backyard, likely dropped by the perpetrator during escape. Combined with the near absence of foreign fingerprints inside the house, these details indicated the attackers had probably worn gloves during the entire crime. The evidence led detectives to suspect a professional home invasion robbery. Moreover, because the door showed no signs of forced entry, investigators believed the family may have let the killer in or been tricked by someone they knew. This raised an urgent series of questions for the investigative team. Was this personal revenge, a targeted killing, or simply a robbery gone wrong? Neighbors described the Henry Nguyen family as a typical hard-working Vietnamese immigrant household, close-knit and peaceful. Henry, 44, had immigrated years earlier and built a small landscaping business. His wife, Trinh Nguyen, 35, managed the home and earned extra income sewing uniforms for local Vietnamese restaurants. The couple had 4 children, Doan, 15, Daniel, 11, David, 10, and Dennis, age 3. Neighbors said the family's home was always filled with laughter. Both parents were dedicated, raising polite and well-mannered children. Within the Vietnamese community in San Bernardino, the Nguyen family was known as hardworking, stable, and respected, a model of perseverance among immigrants. In terms of personal relationships, they had no known conflicts or enemies. They lived harmoniously and were well-liked. However, because of the nature of their business, the couple often kept significant cash at home, a detail that may have placed them squarely in the sights of a criminal group known for targeting Asian households. As soon as the case was received, the San Bernardino Police Department activated its elite homicide unit and prepared to coordinate with determined to track down the perpetrators. Initial assessments focused on the likelihood of a planned, organized home invasion murder. Crime scene showed clear signs of robbery. The killers had acted with extreme brutality, seemingly intent on wiping out the entire family to eliminate witnesses. Their method resembled a series of targeted Asian families in various parts of the country around the same time. For this reason, investigators concentrated heavily on potential gang involvement, especially Asian-based criminal groups known to be active in the region. Physical evidence was examined meticulously. Ballistics analysis revealed that most of the recovered 9mm casings had been fired from the same Glock 17, a semi-automatic handgun used in criminal activity. However, one casing was different, an S&B round, leading forensic analysts to suspect the use of a second firearm. Shoe prints left on the floor also varied in size, supporting the hypothesis that at least 2 or 3 individuals took part in the attack. Further examination of the scene uncovered chilling details. From the wounds and the toothpaste-like marks around Trinh Nguyen's mouth, investigators believe the killers had smeared it on her face and threatened it was poison to make her reveal where the money was kept. The autopsies showed that none of the 5 victims had struggled. All were restrained face down before being shot. A few days after recovering, young Dennis began sharing what he had seen. Dennis recalled that when his father opened the door after a knock, 3 unfamiliar men burst inside, aimed a gun at his father, and ordered the whole family to lie on the floor. He also said the attackers weren't wearing masks, showing they weren't worried about being recognized. Meanwhile, neighbors in the area were interviewed in turn. Several neighbors reported that around 10:30 p.m. on August 9, they heard a series of rapid pop-pop gunshot sounds echoing from a distance. Another witness clearly remembered seeing the bright headlights of a car speeding away almost immediately after the bursts of noise. These consistent statements helped investigators narrow down the exact time of the attack and confirm that the group of perpetrators used a vehicle to make their escape. Because of the extreme brutality and suspected gang involvement, FBI was brought in to assist. Notably, just 2 weeks before the Henry Nguyen massacre, another Vietnamese family in Sacramento, Northern California, had been attacked in a home invasion in which 2 people were shot dead, a 73-year-old man and his 47-year-old son. Another incident occurred in Washington state, where a Vietnamese couple was murdered in their home after being held at gunpoint and extorted for $4,000 USD under the threat of harming their child. All victims were Vietnamese. The perpetrators used 9mm firearms, and they attempted to eliminate nearly every witness. When the news of the Henry Nguyen family tragedy reached them, FBI agents immediately recognized the high likelihood of a connection in this chain of violent crimes. They quickly coordinated with San Bernardino police to share intelligence, cross-match physical evidence, and compare ballistic results across the cases. Ballistics results from the Sacramento crime scene revealed that the bullets recovered there were fired from a different 9mm Glock, but they used the same S&B ammunition found in Henry Nguyen's home. This discovery led investigators to form a new theory. A single Asian-based criminal gang might be behind a chain of murders stretching from Washington state down through California during the summer of 1995. The first significant lead surfaced when detectives carefully reviewed the list of missing belongings provided by the victims' relatives. They learned that Trinh Nguyen routinely wore a valuable jade pendant every day. That necklace had completely vanished without a trace. Believing the pendant could have been pawned or sold elsewhere, investigators immediately alerted jewelry stores and pawn shops across the region, asking them to watch closely for the missing item. Unexpectedly, the next breakthrough came from hundreds of miles away. In Seattle, Washington, police were contacted by a local man reporting that he possessed a jade pendant matching the description police had released to the media. He explained that only a few days after the August 9 murders, an Asian acquaintance named Run Peter Chhoun had stopped by Seattle claiming he was out of gas money and left the pendant as collateral for a small loan. This tip instantly drew the attention of investigators. Cross-agency data checks quickly identified Chhoun as a 22-year-old Cambodian American and a branch leader of the Tiny Rascal gangsters in San Bernardino. In the gang world, he was known by his nickname Chaka. Chhoun had a long history of violence and was suspected in several armed robberies, though insufficient evidence had prevented prosecutors from charging him in the past. The fact that the victim's pendant surfaced in his possession in Seattle made it almost certain he was involved in the Henry Nguyen family massacre. Investigators soon discovered a direct link between Chhoun and the Sacramento case as well. A silver Honda Accord with a dented bumper believed to be the getaway car was registered to the mother of Samreth Pan, known to be Chhoun's close friend and accomplice in the Tiny Rascal Gangsters. When Sacramento police impounded the vehicle, they found several unfired 9mm rounds in the trunk, matching the ammunition used in the previous crime scenes. After identifying the primary suspects, the San Bernardino Police Department, working in coordination with Sacramento Police and the FBI, issued a special nationwide warrant targeting Run Peter Chhoun, Samreth Pan, and several other Tiny Rascal gangsters who might be connected to the case, including Vinh Tran and William Evans. Additionally, Hung Tran, a suspicious neighbor of the Henry Nguyen family, was brought in for questioning. At first she was evasive, but confronted with mounting evidence, she eventually admitted her role. Hung confessed that she had introduced Henry's family to Chhoun and his crew because she believed they kept large amounts of cash at home. She said that on the night of the murders, she was the one who knocked on Henry's door to lure the family into opening it, allowing the gang to storm inside and then return to wait in the car outside. Her testimony helped police reconstruct the exact sequence of events and identify each member's role. Chhoun was the ringleader. Pan assisted in planning. Vinh Tran and William Evans entered the home with Chhoun as armed attackers, and Hung acted as the inside informant. Following these leads, authorities tracked the suspects' movements and soon learned that Chhoun, Vinh, and Evans had left California immediately after the killings. Using the trail of the jade pendant, investigators confirmed that Chhoun had been seen in Seattle. However, by the time FBI agents finally tracked down his hideout there on August 18, 1995, the entire group had already slipped away. 2 days later, on August 20, 1995, Run, Chhoun, Vinh Tran, and William Evans were located and arrested at a highway rest stop in Sacramento while they were driving back towards Southern California. The operation unfolded quickly. All three suspects were taken into custody on the spot, unable to offer resistance. Inside the vehicle, police found a 9mm Glock casing lodged beneath the carpet. Forensic testing confirmed that the casing perfectly matched those recovered from the Henry Nguyen crime scene. Investigators also recovered Trinh Nguyen's jade pendant, securing it as evidence. With this concrete evidence, Run Chhoun had no room left to deny involvement. Almost simultaneously in San Bernardino, police arrested Samreth Pan and Hung Tran. Pan was taken into custody at his home along with a Glock handgun and additional incriminating items. Initially, he tried to deny responsibility, attempting to shift all blame onto Vinh Tran and William Evans. But when confronted with overwhelming forensic and witness evidence and seeking a lighter sentence, both Vinh Tran and William Evans confessed to participating in the massacre and testified that Chhoun was the mastermind who ordered the attack and personally executed the killings. To understand the psychology and motive of the mastermind, we must look back at his violent and deeply troubled past. Run Peter Chhoun, born in 1,973 inches, Cambodia, was the ringleader and the most notorious gunman involved in the case. His life was marked by tragedy from a young age. At just 4 years old, Chhoun was captured by the Khmer Rouge and forced into a labor camp, witnessing brutal executions during the genocide. These horrific childhood memories were believed to have left severe trauma, contributing to years of post-traumatic stress disorder. At age 9, his family immigrated to the United States and settled in Southern California with hopes of rebuilding their lives. But Chhoun struggled immensely. Language barriers, discrimination, and repeated academic failures pushed him into isolation and fed a growing resentment towards society. As a teenager, Chhoun dropped out of school and quickly entered the criminal world. He joined the Tiny Rascal Gangsters, a notoriously violent Asian American gang that rose to prominence in the late 1982 and early 1992. In that world, brutal initiation acts and violent achievements were the rules for gaining respect. Chhoun proved exceptionally reckless and aggressive, never hesitating to use violence. His ruthlessness and manipulative nature helped him rise to a leadership position in the gang while still in his early 20s. As a leader, he planned and directed numerous criminal operations. His group operated mainly in the San Bernardino and Pomona areas of Southern California, occasionally coordinating with TRG branches in Sacramento and Seattle to carry out chains of robberies. Their usual targets were Asian-owned homes and small businesses, victims they believed kept cash on hand and were reluctant to contact police. Under Chhoun's orders, his crew committed dozens of break-ins and robberies and would open fire without hesitation if met with resistance. Before August 1995, Chhoun was believed to have taken part in no fewer than 9 killings connected to a series of armed robberies stretching across both California and Washington. Although psychiatric experts later concluded that he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, they also determined he was fully aware of what he was doing, someone who knew exactly how to use his gang as his own violent urges. After the massacre, Chhoun showed no remorse. He even bragged to other inmates, saying, "We took out all 5, only 1 kid survived." His accomplices were equally troubled individuals. Samreth Pan, who was just 20 years old and a Cambodian-American member of the group, served as the second in command within the tiny rascal gangsters. Pan played a direct role in planning the attack and was responsible for supplying the weapons used. Following the murders, he expressed frustration that Chhoun had killed too many people, but Pan was far from innocent. He himself had shot and killed a Vietnamese father and son during a robbery in Sacramento in July 1995. Vinh Tran, 17, was a rebellious Vietnamese-American teenager desperate to prove himself so he could rise in rank. He was one of the most aggressive, ransacking the victim's home and assisting Chhoun in killing the witnesses. It was also Vinh who devised the idea of smearing toothpaste on Trinh Nguyen's face, pretending it was poison to force her to reveal where the money was hidden. William Evans, 17, the only white member of the group, had joined the gang out of resentment toward his family. In this case, Evans mainly served as a lookout and getaway driver. Finally, there was Nhung Tran, 20, the only accomplice not part of the gang. She knew the group through social connections and had provided information, supplies, and guidance for the attack. Nhung told investigators she had informed Chhoun that the Nguyen family was financially well off and might keep large amounts of cash at home. Chhoun instantly saw them as a jackpot target and began planning the heist with his crew. On the night of the 9th of August 1995, Run Chhoun, Vinh Tran, William Evans, and Nhung Tran set out in a dark-colored Toyota. Chhoun brought 2 Glock 17 pistols, a large knife, and rubber gloves. The plan was clear. Hung would knock on the door under the pretense of a friendly visit, and the moment the door opened, Hun and his 2 men would burst in. Samreth Pan, who hesitated, stayed behind at Nhung's house as backup. Around 10 p.m., as Henry Nguyen and his wife were preparing for bed, they heard Nhung's familiar voice outside. Thinking their neighbor was simply stopping by, Henry opened the door without suspicion. That instant, Chhoun lunged forward, pointed a gun at Henry's forehead, and shouted, "Everybody face down!" Vinh and Evans stormed in, restraining the terrified family. After forcing Henry to reveal where the money was kept, Chhoun discovered the household only had about $2,000 USD. Enraged, he and Vinh smeared toothpaste onto Trinh Nguyen's face, threatening that it was poison and demanding more. When she insisted there was nothing else, Chhoun coldly shot Henry, then fired again and struck little Dennis as the boy crawled toward his father. He ordered the others to finish them, and Vinh shot both young boys, David and Daniel, while Chhoun personally executed the mother and their teenage daughter. Before fleeing, Chhoun and Vinh ripped off rings, earrings, and jewelry from the victims and escaped through the back door. Afterward, the group returned to Carol's house, divided the small amount of stolen property, and casually went out to a billiards bar to drink beer and laugh as if nothing had happened. After the arrests, the Henry Nguyen family massacre was separated into a major criminal case at the San Bernardino Superior Court due to its exceptional severity. Prosecutors charged Run Peter Chhoun, Samreth Pan, Vinh Tran, William Evans, and Nhung Tran with multiple offenses, including 5 counts of first-degree murder, armed robbery, home invasion, and several special circumstances such as multiple victims and committing murder during the course of. From the outset, all 5 defendants faced the possibility of the death penalty, as the killings involved multiple victims, including children. The legal proceedings that followed were lengthy and tense. At a hearing on December 3, 1996, Vinh Tran pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder to avoid a death sentence. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 50 years. William Evans also pleaded guilty to murder and received a life sentence, though he would be eligible for parole after 25 years because he was under 18 at the time of the crime. Nhung Tran received a 50-year sentence with parole eligibility after 15 years. These plea deals allowed prosecutors to focus their full attention on the 2 most dangerous masterminds, Run Peter Chhoun and Samreth Pan. Their trial began in 1998 and drew widespread attention from the American public and the Vietnamese community. In court, Chhoun remained cold and emotionless, denied all charges, and insisted he never fired a single shot. Samreth Pan also denied being a mastermind, claiming he merely lent a car and guns to the group. However, witness after witness took the stand, each recounting the group's brutality in detail. Physical evidence, testimonies, and ballistic examinations all aligned perfectly, making clear each suspect's role in the massacre. On May 6, 1999, the court found Run Peter Chhoun guilty of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and home invasion. Samreth Pan's charges related to the Sacramento and other cases were separated for later trials, but he was effectively convicted as an accomplice in the San Bernardino murders. During sentencing, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty for Chhoun. In 2002, the Los Angeles court also sentenced Samreth Pan to death for his other crimes tied to the Sacramento and Pomona cases. Receiving his death sentence, Chhoun showed no emotion throughout the hearing, neither remorse nor pleading for mercy. In his final statement, he merely gave a faint smirk and declared he would continue appealing. And indeed, for years afterward, Run Chhoun filed appeal after appeal, citing procedural issues, personal circumstances, and psychological factors. All were denied by the California Court of Appeal. Judges consistently ruled that he was fully aware of his actions and deliberately carried out the murders with extreme cruelty and premeditation. As of 2025, Run Peter Chhoun continues to file petitions for federal review, though his chances of sentence reduction remain virtually zero. Because California's death penalty is currently suspended under the governor's moratorium, Chhoun and Samreth Pan remain among more than 700 inmates on death row without scheduled execution dates. Even so, the sentence imposed on them stands as a powerful reminder that once a crime is committed, no amount of running or denial can escape the final judgment of the law. In the early hours of the 4th of March 1995, Xiao Vu, 23, and his younger brother Quoc Vu, 18, children of the owners of the Kim An restaurant, were cleaning up in the kitchen when a sudden burst of gunfire exploded from the dining area. Xiao could only shout a warning before instinctively dragging Quoc and sprinting toward the walk-in freezer, their hearts pounding in terror. The freezer door slammed shut behind them. Inside the darkness, both brothers held their breath, trying not to make a single sound. In those long, suffocating minutes, Xiao and Quoc could hear screams, crying, and angry shouts echoing from outside. Then came another barrage of gunshots, rapid, violent, forcing the brothers to cling to each other in fear. When silence finally fell, Xiao gathered his courage, cracked the door open, and the two crawled out into the dimly lit restaurant. The first thing they saw was a large pool of blood near the bar and the body of a police officer lying face down, his uniform soaked red. In the front kitchen, two motionless figures appeared under the weak light. Xiao rushed over, then collapsed, crying uncontrollably when he realized it was his older sister Ha Vu and his youngest sibling Quang Vu. Ha had already passed away on the floor. Quang was still alive but barely breathing, lying in a widening pool of blood. Quoc immediately bolted out the back door, rushing to the neighbor's home for help. Within minutes, police received an emergency call and swarmed the scene. Paramedics confirmed that Ha Vu had died instantly, while Quang Vu was in critical condition with multiple gunshot wounds. He was rushed to the hospital, but sadly did not survive the trip. After sealing off the area, investigators began a meticulous examination of the crime scene. Spent shell casings and blood trails covered the ground. Behind the bar lay the body of the police officer later identified as Ronald A. Williams II. His duty holster was empty. His service weapon had been taken. In the cramped kitchen, Ha Vu's body was found in a kneeling, collapsed position, as if she had begged for mercy moments before her death. Nearby, loose cash was scattered on the floor, and the restaurant's safe had been forced open and emptied, supporting the early theory of a violent robbery. Because the crime occurred inside the family's restaurant, police quickly obtained information about the two civilian victims. Ha Vu, 24, and Quang Vu, 17, were siblings born into a hardworking Vietnamese immigrant family. Everyone who knew them described them as gentle, kind, and devoted to helping their parents run the business. That night, Ha and Quang stayed late to finish bookkeeping, planning to attend church with their family the following morning. Instead, that morning became their memorial service. Their deaths left a wound that no words could heal, and the entire Vietnamese community in New Orleans was shaken. The fallen police officer was Ronald A. Williams II. Williams served at District 7 of the New Orleans Police Department. Colleagues remembered him as a dedicated and promising young officer. His story was heartbreaking. Just 10 days before the incident, his wife had given birth to their second son. To support his growing family financially, Williams had taken an off-duty security shift at the Chhoun restaurant that night. But in an instant, his bright future and the life he was building were stolen away, leaving behind a young widow and 2 children who never had the chance to know their father. While the investigative team was still reeling from the tragedy, Officer Antoinette Frank, who rotated shifts with Williams at the Chhoun restaurant, suddenly appeared at the scene. She behaved strangely calm, approached the surviving witnesses to ask questions, and claimed that she had also been inside the restaurant when the gunfire erupted. Frank further stated that she had tried to lead the employees out through the back door, but Ha and Quang refused to run, leaving them trapped inside the kitchen. She added that she had driven back to the station to report the incident because she didn't have her police radio with her at the time. At first, Frank's presence offered some reassurance to her colleagues. They believed they now had a reliable insider witness. However, a seasoned officer quickly noticed inconsistencies in her account. If everything happened as Frank described, why would she need to drive back to the precinct to make a report when she clearly had access to a personal cell phone? Abandoning a fellow officer who was critically wounded and leaving 2 injured civilians behind to leave the scene was completely against police protocol. This raised a troubling question. Was Frank truly a witness, or was she directly involved in the crime itself? Then, as he regained his composure, Xiao Vu suddenly pointed at Frank and screamed, "She's the one who killed my siblings!" Everyone froze at the accusation. Frank was immediately restrained, disarmed, and handcuffed at the scene under serious suspicion. Right after Antoinette Frank was arrested, the direction of the investigation changed entirely. Police quickly concluded that this was not a random robbery, but a deliberate, calculated crime. Frank was transported to headquarters for overnight interrogation, while the restaurant was placed under full lockdown for forensic processing. Inside the Chhoun restaurant, forensic teams discovered numerous 9mm shell casings scattered across the floor. Autopsy results later confirmed that the gunshot wounds on the victims all came from the same type of weapon, likely a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. There were no signs of significant struggle, suggesting the victims were ambushed at extremely close range and had no chance to fight back. The safe had been forced open and emptied of cash, yet other valuables remained untouched. This reinforced the theory that the perpetrator's primary objective was money, not random theft. While checking the restaurant's set of keys, the family was shocked to discover that one master key to the front entrance was missing. At this point, Xiao remembered, on the night of March 3, Frank and an unfamiliar young man had visited the restaurant twice to eat late-night food, then returned a third time around 2 a.m. On March 4, that time, Frank used a key to unlock the front door and storm inside. Xiao and Kwok managed to hide, which is why they survived. From their hiding spot inside the walk-in freezer, Xiao saw Frank still in full uniform enter with the young armed man. They demanded Ha and Quang reveal where the money was kept. Chow also stated that Frank was the one who shot his younger brother Quang after the cash had been taken. Additionally, Kwok Vu revealed that before Frank returned for the third time, Officer Williams had warned Chow to be careful because he recognized the man with Frank as a known criminal. Based on Chow's statement, police created a profile of the unidentified suspect, a young black male around 18 with a slender build. These details matched Rogers Joseph Lacaze, a local troublemaker, and Frank's rumored boyfriend. Records showed that Lacaze was a known drug distributor in the New Orleans East area. Police immediately launched a search for him. Before long, a critical lead emerged. 45 minutes after the murders, a credit card belonging to Ronald Williams was used to purchase fuel at a Chevron station in nearby Gretna. Surveillance footage captured a young black man driving an old Ford Torino, the same vehicle witnesses had seen leaving the restaurant. Following the card transaction, police quickly identified Lacaze's location near his brother's apartment. The task force moved in immediately and arrested him just hours after the crime. When handcuffed, Rogers Joseph Lacaze was still carrying the handgun and Ronald Williams's wallet. As for Antoinette Frank, she initially remained calm in the interrogation room, insisting on her innocence and repeating the claim that she had merely been present by coincidence and had fulfilled her duties as an officer. Eventually, under the pressure of mounting evidence, and especially after learning that Chhoun had directly accused her, Antoinette Frank broke down and was forced to confess. She admitted that she and Rogers Lacaze had carried out the robbery at the Kim An restaurant. Still, Frank attempted to shift the blame, claiming that Rogers put her up to everything. She also acknowledged firing shots at the Vu siblings, yet continued to deny killing Ronald Williams. Meanwhile, Rogers Lacaze denied firing any shots and pushed all responsibility onto Frank. It was clear both were trying to frame each other to avoid punishment. However, with overwhelming physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, police had more than enough grounds to charge both Antoinette Frank and Rogers Lacaze with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The investigation revealed that roughly 2 weeks before the robbery, Antoinette Frank had checked out a 9mm handgun from the police evidence room under the pretext of official duties, then later reported it stolen. Forensic specialists believed this weapon was likely the murder weapon, indicating the robbery had been planned in advance. On the night of the crime, Frank and Lacaze also stopped by a Walmart store to purchase a box of 9mm ammunition before heading to the Kim An restaurant. Frank casually wore her full police uniform during the purchase, showing no concern about drawing suspicion. In less than 48 hours after the murders, New Orleans investigators had effectively solved the case. The shocking truth that the perpetrator was a sworn police officer left not only the public, but even the police force itself in disbelief. What could drive a policewoman, someone sworn to uphold justice, to kill civilians and her own colleague? Let's look into the life and hidden psychological turmoil of Antoinette Frank to understand the tragedy that shaped her into a murderer. Antoinette Renee Frank, born in 1971 Opelousas, Louisiana, was once known as a young officer of the New Orleans Police Department. She grew up in an unhappy household. According to later released records, she endured severe emotional and physical distress throughout her childhood, including mistreatment from her father. That toxic environment appeared to leave deep psychological scars, contributing to the troubling personality traits Frank displayed as an adult. Despite her turbulent upbringing, Frank held on to the dream of becoming a police officer. As a teenager, she joined police explorer programs and applied to the New Orleans Police Department at age 20. However, red flags emerged during the application process. For example, Frank had been fired from a previous job but lied about it on her application. She also failed 2 standard psychological evaluations, both indicating poor emotional stability. In addition, she had once disappeared temporarily, leaving behind a distressing letter that caused her family to call police for help. Shockingly, despite all these warning signs, the New Orleans Police Department hired Frank in 1993 due to severe staffing shortages at the time. Colleagues described her as shy, indecisive, and often unsure of proper procedures. Supervisors had repeatedly considered sending her for additional training due to her inadequate performance. Even so, Frank knew how to build the image of a hard-working, dedicated officer. She was once awarded Officer of the Month by a local club for her involvement in community activities. More importantly, Frank was skillful at earning the trust of residents in the area she patrolled. The family who owned the Kim An restaurant was a prime example. Frank frequently visited the restaurant, chatting warmly with everyone and even learning a few Vietnamese phrases to create familiarity. Over time, the Vu family saw Frank almost as a relative and hired her as a part-time security guard. No one suspected that this closeness was only a facade to exploit their trust. Rumors later suggested that Frank knew the Vu family often kept cash at the restaurant and had quietly planned her actions. According to colleagues and acquaintances, Frank had recently expressed resentment toward Ronald Williams, believing he was taking shifts and extra pay that she felt entitled to at the restaurant. Although this has never been fully verified, it appeared Frank harbored jealousy and personal animosity toward Williams. When financial motives mixed with personal grudges, they may have fueled her actions. Frank first met Rogers Joseph Lacaze on the night of the 25th of November 1994, when she responded to a shooting involving rival groups, during which Lacaze had been injured. Frank took responsibility for interviewing him, but instead of following proper procedures, she became entangled in an inappropriate relationship with the troubled young man. Born in 1976 to a poor family in New Orleans, LaCaze dropped out of school early and gravitated toward criminal activity, affiliating with illicit street groups. His own mother had expelled him from the house at age 17 after failing to stop his behavior. By age 18, LaCaze already had a record for violence and was known as reckless and dangerous. Initially, Frank believed she could help him change, but in reality, she became increasingly drawn into his lifestyle. Frank began secretly dating LaCaze, buying him clothes, a phone, and even renting a shiny Cadillac to impress him. Colleagues often spotted LaCaze sitting in the driver's seat of Frank's patrol car, a serious violation that she ignored because of her infatuation. According to investigative records, the pair committed several small robberies targeting drivers and pedestrians, using Frank's badge to stop vehicles while LaCaze took money. From the start, LaCaze seemed to understand Frank's emotional vulnerabilities and took full advantage. He fed her flattering words, making her believe she was in love, eventually turning her into the perfect accomplice for the crime planned for the night of March 3. Late that night, Frank put on her police uniform, carried the 9mm handgun she had borrowed from the evidence room, and drove a Ford Torino to pick up LaCaze. Around 11 p.m., the two stopped by the Kim On restaurant, pretending to be friendly regulars while observing the situation before leaving. Together they planned in the car, then went to Walmart to buy a box of 9mm ammunition in preparation for when the restaurant would be empty. Close to 1 a.m., Frank drove back to the restaurant. By then, the business had closed, leaving the 4 Vu siblings and Ronald Williams inside cleaning up. When Quoc Vu told her the restaurant was closed, Frank ignored him, used the stolen key, and unlocked the door, leaving everyone stunned. Williams approached to question her, but before he could respond, LaCaze suddenly pulled out a gun and fired. The officer collapsed immediately. The gunshots caused Xiao Vu and Quoc Vu to panic and run, hiding inside the walk-in freezer and closing the door. Unable to find them, Frank and LaCaze turned to the remaining 2 siblings, Ha Vu and Quang Vu, forcing them to reveal where the money was kept. Ha cried that she didn't know because Chow had stored it in the kitchen, while Quang tried to protect his sister. Growing impatient, Frank searched the area and eventually found the cash hidden behind rice sacks. Overtaken by greed, she raised her gun and fired at the 2 siblings. After confirming no one else appeared to be alive, Frank and LaCaze collected the cash and prepared to leave. Before exiting, LaCaze also took Williams's firearm and wallet from the counter. While escaping, Frank became furious at the possibility that Xiao and Quoc had survived. Despite LaCaze's objections, she decided to return to the scene to clean up. After dropping LaCaze off at a hiding place, Frank went back to the station, switched to another patrol vehicle, and drove back to the restaurant pretending she had just arrived to assist the investigation. She also carried a second firearm, intending to use it immediately if she encountered any witnesses. However, Frank's plan collapsed almost instantly. As soon as she arrived, police units had already reached the scene after receiving the emergency call from Xiao Vu and Quoc Vu. Unable to act in front of a crowd of fellow officers, Frank pretended to be shocked and quickly fabricated the story that she had just happened to be present at the scene. But the inconsistencies in her behavior were soon noticed, and combined with Shaw's direct accusation, Antoinette Frank was arrested shortly afterward. The case of Antoinette Frank and Rogers LaCaze quickly went to trial, drawing significant attention from the public in New Orleans as well as the Vietnamese diaspora. The Orleans Parish Court decided to separate the 2 defendants into independent trials to ensure fairness and impartiality. Rogers Joseph LaCaze was tried first in July 1995, since he was not a law enforcement officer and his case involved fewer sensitive issues. In court, LaCaze tried to deny responsibility, but the evidence against him was overwhelming and consistent. The jury found LaCaze guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. The judge then sentenced him to death, making him one of the youngest inmates on death row in Louisiana at the time. By September 1995, the trial of Antoinette Frank began and drew even more attention than the previous one. Faced with indisputable evidence, Frank's defense team had little room to argue. Their sole strategy was to emphasize her troubled childhood in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. However, the jury showed no sympathy and unanimously recommended the death penalty for Antoinette Frank. In court, Frank remained expressionless as the sentence was announced, showing no reaction or remorse. But the legal proceedings did not end there. After the trial, Frank's defense team filed numerous appeals over the years, presenting various arguments in an attempt to overturn or lessen the sentence. However, in 2007, the Louisiana Supreme Court rejected all appeals and upheld Frank's death sentence. Around the same time, Rogers Lacaze also filed appeals, but none of his efforts succeeded. What drew even more attention was that after Frank's conviction, another disturbing mystery about her slowly surfaced. In November 1995, a neighbor's dog accidentally uncovered human remains buried beneath the flooring of Frank's former residence. Examinations showed the skull had a gunshot defect and likely belonged to Adam Frank, Antoinette's father, who had been missing since 1993. At that time, Antoinette herself had reported him missing. Because Frank had already been sentenced to death, authorities did not pursue new charges. However, many investigators and members of the public believed she was responsible for her father's death, possibly as an act tied to long-standing trauma from her past. Since then, Antoinette Frank has remained incarcerated and is currently the sole woman on Louisiana's death row. She is confined in solitary housing at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women, living a quiet, isolated existence for nearly 3 decades. By 2023, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards called for a mass clemency review for inmates on death row, including Frank, but the pardon board rejected all petitions due to procedural issues. In 2025, when the new administration under Governor Jeff Landry restarted executions, Frank unexpectedly filed a new appeal, citing lifelong trauma and mental health disorders. On the 15th of May 2025, the Orleans Parish Court granted her the right to a resentencing hearing scheduled for December 2025, opening a small possibility for her to escape the death penalty, although her murder conviction would still carry life imprisonment. The case of Antoinette Frank was not only a heartbreaking tragedy for the victims' families, but also a profound shock to society, as a police officer seen as a symbol of order and justice had become a cold-blooded killer. The media at the time described it as the case that shattered the spirit of a city already exhausted by crime. Public outrage surged, fueling demands for major reforms within the police department to restore trust in an institution whose reputation had been severely damaged. Indeed, after this case, the New Orleans Police Department initiated a sweeping internal reform. Recruitment procedures were overhauled, eliminating the policy of prioritizing local applicants who failed to meet standards, strengthening psychological evaluations, improving competency assessments, and enforcing stricter discipline across the force. Alongside these reforms, anti-corruption efforts were intensified to rebuild public confidence in the city's law enforcement. On the evening of the 23rd of June 2019, Alan Bowie, a resident of Habits Court, was playing with his 5-year-old son when he suddenly heard shouting coming from the neighboring home of Ta Dinh Chi, a Vietnamese-American man living next door. Before he could understand what was happening, Alan was startled by a series of loud gunshots. In that terrifying moment, he grabbed his son, pushed his wife into a corner of the room, and signaled for everyone to stay silent. Right then, Mrs. Chhoun, Mr. Chi's wife, suddenly jumped over the fence, separating the two houses, and ran frantically into Alan's yard. She rushed through the unlocked back door and hid in the bedroom of Alan's son, locking the door behind her. The woman was trembling, out of breath, and unable to speak through her tears. Trying to remain calm, Alan looked out through the window blinds. He saw a man running into the backyard of the neighboring house, searching wildly as if looking for someone. Under the dim lights, Alan recognized him. It was Mr. Chi, holding a black handgun, his eyes filled with anger. Thankfully, unable to spot his wife, he ran back inside. Seizing the moment, Alan immediately dialed 911. Within minutes, the quiet neighborhood erupted with the sound of police sirens and ambulances racing toward the scene. Officers quickly formed a tactical perimeter as the situation was classified as an active armed standoff. High-powered searchlights swept across the 2-story house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Outside, frightened residents fled the area, their cries echoing through the night. Survivors were escorted to safety as police locked down the entire block. A SWAT team was deployed, bringing armored vehicles and preparing to breach the house if the situation escalated. Over police radio, officers received reports that as many as 7 people might still be trapped inside with the shooter. This forced the response team to move with extreme caution. When officers finally approached the home, they found two severely injured individuals, a middle-aged man and woman lying motionless in the living room. Both were in critical condition and barely conscious. SWAT personnel moved an armored vehicle close to extract them safely. Despite receiving emergency medical treatment and being rushed to the hospital, both victims later succumbed to their injuries. Meanwhile, the tense standoff between police and the suspect inside the house continued. For hours, officers used loudspeakers urging Chi Ta-din to drop his weapon and surrender, but there was only silence in return. To neutralize the threat, the SWAT team decided to deploy flash grenades to disorient the suspect while breaking windows to insert cameras and assess the situation inside. After more than 5 hours of containment, police were forced to authorize a breach at 1:25 a.m. Upon entering the home, they encountered a devastating scene. Two women were found in a ground floor bedroom, both already deceased from gunshot injuries. One victim was still holding a prayer bead necklace, suggesting they had endured extreme fear in their final moments. Outside in the yard, suspect Ta-din Chi was found deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound with a handgun beside him. In total, 5 people lost their lives in the incident, 4 victims and the suspect himself. The inside of the home was in complete disarray. Shell casings were scattered around, clear signs of pursuit marked the floor, and furniture had been overturned. Everything pointed to a violent outburst that unfolded within minutes, leaving the neighborhood in shock. As police and forensic teams began the identification process, they were stunned to learn that all the victims were relatives of Chi's wife, family members who had only recently arrived in the United States. The first victim was Hoang Latui, 51, a resident of Milpitas, California. She was the older sister of Mrs. Chhoun, Chi's wife. She had recently come to the US under a family reunification visa to live closer to her siblings and nieces and nephews. At the time of the incident, Mrs. Tui was visiting her sister for the weekend. She did not survive the attack. The second victim was Hong Ngoc Phung, 48, the older brother of Mrs. Chhoun. Mr. Phung had come to the US with his wife and daughter, also through family reunification. Friends described him as gentle, hardworking, and someone who cherished the chance to live near his family. He was critically injured and transported to the hospital, but did not survive. His wife, Pham Thi Quay, 42, also sustained a severe gunshot wound and passed away shortly after being taken to the hospital. Those who knew her remembered her as warm, caring, and devoted to her family. The youngest victim was Hong Thon Hoa, 23, who lived in San Jose. She was the daughter of Mr. Phung and Mrs. Quay. Than Hoa had recently graduated from university in Vietnam and had only been in the US for a few months. At 23, she had many dreams for her future and hoped to support her family as they adjusted to life abroad. Tragically, she lost her life to an unimaginable event. Autopsy findings indicated that Than Hoa was shot at close range. All 4 victims were relatives of Mrs. Chhoun, and all had recently arrived in the US for long-awaited reunions. A family member, Quat Van To, said tearfully that they had only just come from Vietnam, they were good people, and none of them had done anything to provoke him. The funerals for the victims were held days later, drawing a large crowd of relatives, friends, and members of the local Vietnamese community, all mourning the heartbreaking loss. As for the perpetrator, Ta-din Chi, age 66 at the time of the incident, was born in Vietnam and immigrated to the United States in the 1982nd. In his younger years, Chi lived in Orange County, California, home to a large Vietnamese-American community. After marrying Mrs. Chhoun, the couple moved to San Jose, where Chi worked in construction. According to friends and acquaintances, he was a hard-working man who always tried his best to provide for his family. Chi and his wife had one daughter named Connie Ta in English. Connie was deeply cherished by her parents. She was their pride and the bond that held the family together. To neighbors, their small family appeared stable and comfortable. In terms of personality, Ta-din Chi displayed a mix of traditional Vietnamese values and modern American influences. He viewed himself as the head of the household and believed he should be the primary decision maker. Friends described Chi as somewhat strict and occasionally stubborn, often expecting others to follow his lead. Still, In everyday life, he was seen as generous, friendly, and willing to help those around him. So what could have driven a family man to turn a weapon on all of his in-laws? Once the scene was secured, the San Jose Police Department and investigative units immediately began reconstructing the events and identifying the motive. Forensic technicians carefully collected shell casings, blood samples, fingerprints, and remaining physical evidence. Based on the number of recovered casings, police determined that the suspect fired approximately 6 rounds. The handgun found beside Chi's body was identified as a black Springfield XD 9mm semi-automatic pistol, the only weapon used in the incident. All shell casings at the scene matched the 9mm caliber of this firearm. Autopsy findings concluded that Chi died instantly from a gunshot wound to the right temple, consistent with a self-inflicted injury, confirming that he ended his own life after attacking the victims. To understand what led to the tragedy, investigators focused on interviewing surviving witnesses and family members. The first person questioned was Mrs. Chhoun, Chi's wife. Shaken and terrified, she recalled that the family had been gathered for dinner that evening. Midway through the meal, she and her husband began arguing primarily about her relatives who had just arrived from Vietnam. According to Chhoun, Chi accused her of caring more about her side of the family than his. The argument escalated quickly. Suddenly, Chi stood up and went to his room. No one imagined that only minutes later, he would return holding a gun and begin firing toward Mr. Phuong and Mrs. Thuy. Horrified, Chhoun grabbed her daughter Connie and ran toward the back door to escape. Luckily, the door was unlocked. Trembling with fear, the two fled into the yard. When Chhoun looked back, she saw her sister-in-law, Mrs. Quay, and her niece, Than Hoa, panicking in the living room, while her husband stood behind them with a weapon in hand. Paralyzed with fear, Chhoun could only run climbing over the fence and rushing to the neighbor's home for help. Her fragmented statements matched the scene recorded by investigators. The first 2 victims, Mr. Phuong and Mrs. Quay, were found near the front area, likely struck as they stood during the heated argument. The remaining victims, Mrs. Thuy and Than Ho, were discovered in a bedroom, suggesting they had attempted to hide but were tracked down. In addition to Chhoun's account, witness Alan Bui provided detailed testimony. He confirmed hearing a loud argument followed by gunshots and described the moment Chhoun ran into his home seeking help, as well as seeing Chi with a gun searching the yard. During the investigation, police uncovered another critical detail from Quat Van Tu, a relative on Chhoun's side. He revealed that only a few hours before the incident, Ta Din Chi had called him in an unusually emotional tone, asking him to look after Connie and saying ominously that he would deal with all of them. At the time, Mr. Tu never imagined that the them Chi referred to were actually his wife's relatives, the very family members who had just arrived in the United States through sponsorship. Yet this was not the first time Ta Din Chi had expressed such threats. Previously, he had repeatedly shown resentment and made alarming remarks toward his in-laws, but everyone assumed these were outbursts made in anger and tried to calm him down, never believing they would one day materialize. Upon deeper review, police found several unsent draft messages on Chi's phone containing highly negative statements. He wrote that he felt hopeless, wanted to end everything, and expressed frustration over his inability to sponsor relatives from his own side of the family, feeling that life had treated him unfairly. With this new lead regarding immigration sponsorship, investigators examined Chi's criminal background and discovered something significant. Records revealed that he had been arrested in Orange County, California, in 1,988 inches connection with a robbery case. Chi was later convicted and served 2 years in prison before being released in 1990. It was a serious offense, and under federal law, he was permanently prohibited from owning or possessing any type of firearm. After moving to San Jose, Chi's official record appeared relatively clean, with no new offenses. However, the old conviction quietly affected his adult life. Family members told investigators he often complained that his sponsorship applications for his own relatives were repeatedly denied because of his past. Meanwhile, his wife, Mrs. Chhoun, successfully sponsored her siblings to immigrate. This disparity fueled Chi's growing resentment, gradually turning into jealousy and bitterness toward his wife's family. Their daughter, Connie, shared that arguments between her parents frequently revolved around finances and extended family issues, making the home environment increasingly tense. Connie attempted to mediate many times, but ultimately felt powerless as tensions worsened. In the days leading up to the incident, Chhoun did not show any unusual behavior apart from becoming unusually quiet. According to Connie, on that Sunday evening, he sat alone outside for a long time, silently drinking tea. His eyes were fixed on the suitcases belonging to the newly arrived relatives, stacked neatly in the living room and filled with gifts from Vietnam. Everyone thought he was simply reflecting on family matters, but no one realized he was struggling with increasingly overwhelming emotions. Longtime neighbor Tom Nguyen, who often drank morning coffee with Chhoun, said Chhoun had always been somewhat traditional and occasionally quarrelsome, but in recent months had become more irritable and quick-tempered. He frequently complained about household conflicts, especially with the relatives who had recently immigrated. Just 1 week before the incident, police had visited the home in response to a report of a heated argument. However, the situation was resolved without a domestic violence report because both parties agreed to settle the matter peacefully. This suggested that the tragedy was not an impulsive act, but the culmination of long-standing tensions within the household. Mrs. Chhoun, nearly 20 years younger than her husband, was gentle but independent, having lived in the United States long enough to embrace principles of equality. This often clashed with Chhoun's traditional mindset and desire for control. When Chhoun passed her citizenship test and successfully sponsored her siblings to immigrate, Ta Dinh Chi began to feel inferior and overshadowed. Because of his criminal record, he faced legal barriers to citizenship and could not sponsor his own relatives, deepening his feelings of frustration. Ultimately, all of these bottled up grievances erupted on that fateful night. After establishing the motive, investigators concluded that Ta Dinh Chi had targeted his wife's relatives due to deep-seated jealousy over immigration sponsorship issues. Following the attack, he died at the scene, bringing the tragic chain of events to an end. Because the suspect, Ta Dinh Chi, was deceased, the case did not proceed through a typical criminal trial. However, police and prosecutors were still required to finalize the investigation and issue an official report. The final determination stated that Chhoun was the sole suspect, responsible for the deaths of 4 in-laws before his own death. The incident was classified as a severe case of domestic violence. Although no formal courtroom trial took place, a trial in public opinion unfolded within the Vietnamese community and the international press. Both US and Vietnamese media reported extensively on the tragedy, leaving the public stunned. Many condemned Chhoun's actions, labeling him a cold-blooded killer or family destroyer. Some argued that had he survived, he would have deserved the maximum penalty under the law. The city government of San Jose and other local agencies quickly issued statements in response to the tragedy. On the 25th of June 2019, 2 days after the incident, 5 female members of the San Jose City Council released a joint statement expressing deep condolences to the victims' families. They emphasized that domestic violence is rarely an impulsive act. It is often the result of prolonged patterns of abuse, control, and emotional pressure. The council members urged the community to continue supporting one another and to help identify and prevent domestic violence before more innocent lives are lost. The statement also highlighted an alarming reality. Domestic violence within Asian communities often remains hidden due to cultural, linguistic, and immigration-related barriers. City officials affirmed that they would increase investment in victim support services and reassured the public that local police do not coordinate with immigration authorities when handling domestic violence cases. This means that victims can seek help without fear of jeopardizing their residency status. It was a humane and reassuring message, encouraging individuals to speak up for their own safety. As for the perpetrator's family, Mrs. Chhoun and her daughter Connie chose to withdraw from the public eye as they coped with overwhelming grief. Connie lost 3 close family members at once and carried the additional emotional burden of knowing that the perpetrator was her own father. A family friend shared that the mother and daughter moved out of the house where the tragedy occurred and temporarily lived with relatives to recover emotionally. Later, the home was reportedly put up for sale as no one in the family could bring themselves to return there. The San Jose family massacre also exposed the darker side of the immigrant dream, showing how family tensions, especially over sponsorship, can become a catalyst for catastrophe. A lack of understanding of immigration laws further contributed to the tension. Chi believed his criminal record completely prevented him from sponsoring relatives, whereas in reality, immigration authorities review cases individually and do not impose an absolute ban. He may have misunderstood or failed to seek proper legal advice. This serves as an important lesson for immigrant communities. When facing difficulties, seek guidance from legal professionals or community support organizations instead of allowing resentment and misunderstanding to build up into irreversible consequences. From a gun control perspective, the case reignited ongoing debates in the United States. Although Chi was prohibited from owning firearms, he still managed to obtain one. The weapon was later determined to have been stolen, underscoring the persistent dangers posed by the black market gun trade. Many experts noted that even in California, where firearm regulations are among the strictest, those who are determined can still find ways to acquire dangerous weapons. What do you think about the deeper motives behind the perpetrator's actions? Could there have been other underlying factors behind this tragedy? Feel free to share your thoughts or perspectives in the comments below. Circus Hotel, located on the northern end of the Las Vegas Strip, is one of the oldest resort properties in the city. With its distinctive circus-themed design and affordable pricing, it has long been a popular destination for families and budget-conscious tour groups. Despite its crowds, Circus is not a high-end property and is frequently criticized for outdated facilities and lacks security. In late May 2018, a group of Vietnamese travelers departed from Ho Chi Minh City, transited through Los Angeles, and continued on to Las Vegas. They were on a tour inspection trip, partly work, partly leisure, with plans to visit iconic destinations like the Grand Canyon, Hoover Dam, and fully experience the vibrant nightlife of the city that never sleeps. But no one could have predicted what would come next. In this place that seemed like paradise, among thousands of brightly lit windows, a single hotel door that failed to lock properly opened the path to tragedy. On the morning of the 1st of June 2018, Las Vegas greeted a new day with its usual blazing sunlight and bustling energy. Yet on the 21st floor of Circus, an unusual silence loomed. Tuan Trinh, the lead tour guide of the Vietnamese group, noticed that two of his colleagues had not left their room for the scheduled Hoover Dam excursion. After multiple unanswered calls, he proceeded to take the group to Hoover Dam as planned and asked the hotel reception to help check room 2123. In the early afternoon, he returned to the ill-fated room with hotel security. The door was slightly ajar, with no signs of forced entry. But the moment it opened, a horrifying scene appeared. The room was ransacked, blankets tossed everywhere, and blood stained the carpet. Two bodies lay motionless inside. The woman was lying on her back, covered in multiple brutal stab wounds. The man lay face down, the floor soaked with blood beneath him. The shock was so overwhelming that Tuan, the first person to witness the crime scene, nearly collapsed where he stood. Moments later, police sirens echoed through the hallway. Investigators from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department arrived quickly, secured the 21st floor, and began processing the scene. It was immediately classified as a major homicide. The room showed clear evidence of a violent struggle, shattered lamps, overturned furniture, and luggage scattered across the floor. However, there were no signs of forced entry. The windows and the door lock were intact. The most critical detail was that the door had not been securely latched from the inside. Combined with the disappearance of valuables such as wallets, phones, and handbags, detectives suspected a burglary interrupted by the victims, escalating into murder. While preserving the crime scene, the top priority was confirming the victims' identities. Based on statements from Tuan Trinh and identification documents found in the room, police determined the female victim to be Nguyen Boi Sang, 38, and the male victim to be Nguyen Le Ba Quang, 30, both Vietnamese citizens and members of the same tour group. That same afternoon, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department issued an official notice to the Consulate General of Vietnam in San Francisco and contacted the victims' families to assist with legal procedures. News of the double homicide quickly spread beyond the local area, drawing intense attention from both Vietnamese and international media. But behind the short headlines in the press was a devastating story of loss and innocence. Nguyen Boi Sang, the female victim, was a successful businesswoman, co-founder of a reputable travel agency in Ho Chi Minh City with nearly 80 employees. To her colleagues, she was a decisive and dedicated leader. To her family, she was a loyal wife and the mother of 3 young children. To her eldest daughter, she was even a best friend. Her decision to join the USF trip in May 2018 had been a last-minute choice, part business, part market research. Sharing a room with a male colleague may have seemed unusual, but it was a practical arrangement for the tour group and one her husband fully trusted. As for Nguyen Laba Quang, 30, he was an energetic, cheerful young tour guide beloved by both coworkers and clients. The youngest son in a Vietnamese-Chinese family in Saigon, he had been the greatest hope of his parents after the sudden passing of his older brother. Openly gay, he was treated like family by Sang and her husband. The two had arrived in Las Vegas excited and full of anticipation after a stopover in California, looking forward to the dazzling city of lights. Yet only hours after checking into their room, they became victims of a brutal crime, their lives ending tragically far from home. The double homicide at Circus Circus was immediately classified as a high-priority case. That afternoon, a detailed forensic examination began. There were no signs of forced entry, no foreign fingerprints, and no external DNA indicating the killer had worn gloves and left no obvious biological trace. However, investigators did find one crucial clue: several faint bloody shoe prints near the doorway. All were photographed for later comparison. Autopsies revealed that both victims died around 4 a.m. from acute blood loss caused by multiple stab wounds inflicted with a sharp weapon. Sang had several defensive injuries on her hands, showing she had fought desperately. Quang suffered fatal stab wounds to the heart and lungs, and a particularly brutal injury to the genital area, raising the question, was this truly just a robbery? But targeted murder was quickly dismissed, as both victims were newly arrived tourists with no local connections. Investigators therefore returned to the original theory, a burglary that escalated into homicide. After accounting for missing items, wallets, a watch, smartphones, backpacks, and cash, they estimated the total loss at only a few $1,000s. Not a large amount, but enough for a desperate thief to kill. From there, the likely sequence of events became clearer. The intruder exploited the unlocked door, slipped inside while the victim slept, and upon being discovered, killed them to eliminate witnesses before grabbing valuables and fleeing. With this theory, one fact was almost certain. The killer had to appear somewhere on the hotel's extensive security camera system. Once the initial hypothesis was formed, investigators immediately turned to the hotel's dense network of surveillance cameras covering the lobby, hallways, elevators, and the rear manor building. They focused on footage recorded between midnight and 5 a.m. on June 1, the window during which the victims were believed to have been killed. Hours of footage were reviewed frame by frame in search of any suspicious individual. And then, at exactly 4 a.m., a figure caught their attention. A tall, slender black male wearing a gray hoodie and a cap emerged from the elevator on the 21st floor. He had no luggage, no bags, only a dark silhouette moving quietly through an empty hallway. About 45 minutes later, the same man reappeared at the elevator. But this time, he was carrying a dark backpack and a black women's handbag. Investigators immediately noticed an extremely important detail. His t-shirt was inside out, with the seams visible, a tactic commonly used by criminals to hide blood stains after an attack. Every detail, the timing, the suspicious behavior, the change of clothing, the items he carried matched perfectly with what detectives saw at the crime scene. Police were now almost certain this man was the killer. The next step was identifying him. Based on the camera timestamps and the list of guests who checked out between 4:30 and 6 a.m. From the manor section, an area connected internally to the main tower, police began narrowing down their suspects. The electronic checkout system highlighted one name, Julius Damiano DeAngelo Trotter, 31, a resident of Los Angeles. Trotter checked out at 5:30 a.m., less than an hour after the security camera captured him leaving the 21st floor with the victim's backpack and handbag. When police compared Trotter's ID photo with the surveillance footage, the match was unmistakable. His criminal record showed previous convictions for assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer, and he was on probation at the time of the murders. That night, June 1, a nationwide warrant was issued for Julius Trotter. He was no longer in Las Vegas. Investigators learned that immediately after leaving the hotel, Trotter and his girlfriend Itasca Dean withdrew cash from an ATM at the Palms Casino, then quickly took a taxi back to Chino, California. Perhaps he believed that with a few stolen items and basic attempts to cover his tracks, he was already safe. He was wrong. A federal task force was activated instantly, a joint operation between the FBI, Nevada law enforcement, California authorities, and other agencies. At first, Trotter and Dean hid at a friend's home in California. But once the media began reporting that a man from Los Angeles was wanted in connection with a double homicide in Las Vegas, they no longer felt secure and kept moving. On the morning of the 7th of June 2018, nearly a week into the manhunt, California officers spotted Trotter's vehicle traveling on an interstate highway. When patrol officers signaled him to pull over, he ignored the command and fled, triggering a high-speed chase that stretched for miles. Eventually, the vehicle was forced to stop. Trotter jumped out and tried to run on foot, but was subdued shortly after. His girlfriend was arrested at the scene. A search of the vehicle produced a series of damning pieces of evidence. A black handbag confirmed to belong to Nguyen Boi Song, a backpack belonging to Nguyen Le Ba Quang, containing blood-stained clothing, and a pair of sneakers later determined to have blood from both victims, with the DNA inside the shoe matching Julius Trotter. Although the murder weapon was never found, the amount of evidence collected was more than enough to charge him. Julius Damiano D'Angelo Trotter, born in 1987 and living in Los Angeles, was no stranger to law enforcement. He had been arrested for assaulting a peace officer with a weapon, and at the time of the murders, he was still on probation. Trotter had no stable job and lived a reckless, transient lifestyle. He spent most of his time in casinos along the Las Vegas Strip, sinking deeper into gambling debt. Despite having a child with his girlfriend, he showed no interest in being a father. His life revolved around gambling, partying, and getting money the easiest way he knew: theft. No one expected that an opportunistic thief like Trotter could escalate into a cold-blooded killer. On the night of the 31st of May 2018, while most hotel guests at Circus Circus slept, a few dim windows in the Manor building remained lit. In the darkness, Julius Trotter lay awake. A long streak of gambling losses had emptied his pockets. Desperate, he needed quick cash to recover. But instead of risking theft inside a casino filled with hundreds of cameras, Trotter considered a simpler but far more dangerous tactic: a door push. This method, used by opportunistic thieves on the Strip, involved quietly walking hotel corridors in the early morning and twisting door handles, hoping to find a room left unlocked. At 3:50 a.m., Trotter left his manor room, pulled his hoodie low over his face, and walked through the corridor toward the main tower. Elevator footage showed him wearing a black t-shirt under a gray hoodie, his face tense. At 4 a.m., the elevator reached the 21st floor. Trotter stepped out, moving silently through the hallway, trying each door handle one by one. Then he reached room 2123. The handle turned easily. The door opened without force. A simple mechanical failure in the lock had unintentionally opened the gate to tragedy. Under the faint glow from the window blinds, Trotter slipped inside. In front of him were two guests sleeping on separate double beds. Judging by their appearance, he assumed they were Asian tourists, potential targets carrying cash, jewelry, or valuable electronics. From his pocket, Trotter pulled out a folding knife, his usual self-defense weapon. He approached the nightstand, quietly taking a woman's wallet and several pieces of jewelry. Then he turned toward the backpacks and handbags near the door. But at that moment, Nguyen Boi Song suddenly woke up. In the dark, she saw a shadowy figure standing near the doorway. Panicked, she screamed. The situation escalated instantly. Trotter rushed forward, covered her mouth with his hand, and dragged her off the bed. The noise woke Nguyen Le Ba Quang, who immediately switched on the light and rushed to help his colleague. Trotter reacted with ruthless, unhesitating force. He spun around and drove the knife straight into Quang's chest with a fatal blow. The victim collapsed instantly, his shirt and bed sheets quickly soaked in blood. Witnessing the horrifying scene, Sang screamed in terror. But to Trotter, she was no longer just a victim, she was a witness. He turned toward her and unleashed a frenzy of stabbing attacks. In less than a minute, both victims were motionless. Yet the brutality did not stop there. Trotter returned to Quang's body and stabbed him repeatedly in the abdomen and genital area, an act that suggested either personal rage or a deeply distorted psychological state. Although no later evidence ever showed any connection between him and the victims, investigators were never able to fully explain the senseless savagery of his actions. Once the room fell silent, Trotter regained his composure. He went through the victims' belongings, taking more cash, phones, and a wallet containing passports. Even though the Vietnamese currency was worthless to him, he stuffed everything into his pockets, driven by pure instinct to steal. Seeing that his own shirt was stained with blood, he wrapped the knife in Quang's clothing, then removed his black t-shirt, turned it inside out, and put it back on to hide the bloodstains. Pulling his hoodie low over his face, he opened the door and checked the hallway. Everything was still quiet. At 4:45 a.m., he took the elevator down. The camera recorded him again, Trotter carrying a travel backpack and a black women's handbag, his inside-out t-shirt showing the exposed seams, a small detail that would later become a crucial clue. He calmly walked through the casino floor, blending in with a few late-night guests, then exited the hotel through the main entrance as if nothing had happened. Returning to his room, he woke his girlfriend, Itasca Dean, and urged her to leave immediately. When the front desk asked about the early checkout, he simply said there was an emergency, keeping a mask on to avoid being recognized. Less than an hour after the murders, Julius Trotter and his girlfriend had already taken a taxi and left the hotel. In the pale June morning light, the Circus Tower gradually faded behind them. He believed he had escaped. But what he didn't know was this. Every move he made, every step he took, had already been recorded, and the wheels of justice, though slow, never miss a single link in the chain. In October 2024, after more than 6 years of delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and various legal complications, the trial of Julius Damiano DeAngelo Trotter finally began at the Clark County District Court in Las Vegas. From the outset, prosecutors delivered a forceful indictment, charging Trotter with first-degree murder, robbery, and armed burglary. They portrayed him as an opportunistic thief who became a cold-blooded killer, willing to take 2 innocent lives just to steal a few belongings. However, defense attorney Ozzie Fumo unexpectedly introduced a controversial strategy. He did not deny that Trotter was present at the scene, but argued instead that the crime was not motivated by robbery, but by a supposed crime of passion. His most provocative claim came when he presented a short video clip showing Sang resting her head on Quang's shoulder, framing it as evidence of a romantic motive. The courtroom fell silent, but only briefly. Prosecutors immediately countered with testimony from Sang's colleagues and her husband, all confirming unequivocally that Quang was openly gay and that the relationship between the 2 victims was purely professional and even familial. The defense's affair theory collapsed instantly, and the court steered the proceedings back to the core of the case, a robbery turned homicide. Over the following days, prosecutors systematically presented a mountain of irrefutable physical evidence, including surveillance footage showing Trotter going up to the 21st floor at 4 a.m. and returning 45 minutes later with a backpack and a black handbag. The victim's belongings were covered from Trotter's vehicle, sneakers stained with the victim's blood and containing Trotter's DNA. Making matters worse for the defendant, his girlfriend, Itasca Dean, took the stand. Dean testified that Trotter left their room at 4 a.m. and returned shortly after in a panic, wearing his t-shirt inside out and urging her to pack immediately. Although she later recanted the portion of her statement where she claimed Trotter confessed to killing them, the rest of her testimony aligned perfectly with the established timeline. And then came one of the most emotional moments of the trial. On the courtroom screen appeared the eldest daughter of Nia Boy Sang. Through tears, she spoke about her mother, the pillar of the family, and her best friend. Sang's husband, Hưng was also called to testify. He shared the story of their marriage, of their 3 young children suddenly left without a mother, and the irreplaceable void the crime had carved into their lives. Finally, Bong Lei, Quang's mother, stepped slowly to the witness stand, her trembling hands holding her son's portrait. Her husband and eldest child had passed away years earlier. Quang was all I had left, she said, her voice breaking. He took away the last support of my life. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Even the jurors struggled to hide their emotions. In a final attempt to save himself, Julius Trotter chose to testify. He continued to deny responsibility, claiming he killed no one and that the stolen property had been given to him by a friend. But when confronted about the DNA on the shoes and his immediate flight from Las Vegas, he lost his composure and snapped, "That's none of my business." The arrogance of that answer was the final breaking point. The courtroom all but turned against him. No one believed him anymore. After nearly 2 weeks of testimony, the jury needed only 3 hours to deliberate before returning with the verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The trial then entered the sentencing phase. Prosecutors sought the death penalty. The defense highlighted mitigating factors, such as good behavior in custody and support from family. Unexpectedly, the victims' families demonstrated extraordinary compassion. Hưng told the court, "I don't want any more lives to be taken. Life without parole is justice enough." On the 31st of October 2024, the jury officially sentenced Julius Trotter to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He turned toward the jury and quietly said, "Thank you." The trial ended with a poignant moment. Chhoun's mother stepped forward and embraced Trotter's defense attorney. It was not a gesture of victory or defeat, but a symbol of forgiveness and of a community choosing to end a tragedy with humanity rather than hatred. The case of Julius Trotter murdering 2 Vietnamese citizens at the Circus Hotel has officially come to a legal close. But for the victims' families, the Vietnamese community, the tourism industry, and even the city of Las Vegas itself, the aftershocks of this tragedy have never truly faded. Las Vegas, a city known for its lights and glamour, suddenly became associated with a horrifying double homicide. Many people were stunned to learn that a single door left improperly latched could become a passport for a killer. In the aftermath, Circus was forced to review and replace its entire electronic lock system. Quietly, many other hotels on the Strip followed suit, a late but necessary response to a tragedy that could have been prevented. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, the case became a national headline, stirring profound grief and public outrage. The country mourned deeply for 2 kind, talented individuals whose lives were stolen by greed and senseless brutality. After the case, safety awareness within the tourism community shifted significantly. Overseas tour groups became more cautious, checking doors, choosing hotels with stronger security systems, carrying personal alarms, and staying alert when sharing rooms. It was a lesson no one wanted but one everyone needed. Yet even with the trial concluded, lingering questions remain. The murder weapon has never been found, a silent piece of evidence still lost somewhere in the shadows. And an even bigger question persists: was this truly the first time Trotter carried out such a risky door push? It is entirely possible he had successfully committed smaller thefts before without being caught, a reminder that opportunistic criminals often reveal themselves only when it is far too late. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At 8:43 in the morning on September 25th, 2017, the 911 call center received a call from a man. On the other end, his trembling voice stuttered as he vaguely said, "My wife didn't make it," and that he needed help. Despite the fragmented explanation, the dispatcher understood that a serious situation was unfolding and immediately sent police officers and medical personnel to the address on West 61st Street. When authorities arrived, the caller was already standing outside, waiting, his face pale with shock. He led the officers down to the basement bathroom and choked out the words that his wife was no longer breathing. Who had done this terrible thing? What exactly had happened that morning? To answer these questions, aside from the caller's statement, the forensic and crime scene teams needed to step in to collect every objective clue with the highest precision. Inside the house, even the most seasoned investigators were stunned by the scene. The woman's body lay curled up in the shower, her head leaning against the corner beneath the shower head as if she had been trying to shrink away from violence. Around her neck was a dark purple ligature mark, consistent with the size of a thin electrical cord like a phone charger cable. Indeed, a phone charging cable was found discarded on the floor next to the victim's body, a silent witness to the crime that had occurred. The cramped bathroom showed signs of a struggle. A few bottles of shampoo and personal items had fallen, and the shower curtain was pushed aside. Everything suggested that the victim had fought desperately to escape when she was suddenly attacked. There were no signs of forced entry or missing belongings. Thus, robbery or an intruder could be ruled out. All suspicion pointed towards someone inside the household. To investigators, finding a wife dead in her own bathroom with signs of violence was a classic indicator of a domestic homicide, and this time the suspect was present at the scene. Police quickly secured the area, photographed the scene, and collected evidence. The phone charger cable was sealed for forensic analysis. The victim's body was taken in by the Hennepin County medical examiner for autopsy to determine the precise cause and time of death. Meanwhile, the caller was invited to the station for questioning. Shortly after the police arrived, the identities of both the victim and the suspect were clearly established. The woman found in the bathroom was Mai Wong Huing Trong, also known as Michelle, 48 years old, a petite but strong Vietnamese woman who lived and worked in Minnesota with her husband. They had 2 grown sons. Michelle was described by her friends as a devoted wife, caring mother, and a successful businesswoman in the community. Around 2013, the couple opened Pen Nails Spa in the city of Richfield. With her skillful techniques and friendly demeanor, Michelle quickly built a large base of loyal customers. Many clients adored her so much that they followed her from salon to salon, eventually becoming regulars when she opened her own shop. Beyond her business, Michelle was also remembered for her generous heart and her talent for traditional Vietnamese cooking. She often invited friends and longtime customers to her home to enjoy Vietnamese meals she prepared herself. In her family, Michelle was the nurturing figure who loved her husband and 2 sons deeply. Friends said she was especially proud of her boys and dedicated a great deal of time to raising and guiding them. Michelle's husband, the man who made the emergency call, was Tony Le, a 55-year-old Vietnamese American who was born in Vietnam before immigrating to the United States in the 1990s. Throughout their 20 years of marriage, Tony fulfilled the role of husband and father in a typical immigrant household. He and his wife built Pen Nails Spa together and was respected by friends and coworkers for his hardworking nature. Many acquaintances said Tony was a quiet, reserved man who rarely socialized outside of work and family. With such background information, no one would have expected a homicide to occur in this family. They had no known enemies, nor were there signs of burglary. What hidden truth lay behind this tragedy? Minneapolis police, in collaboration with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, immediately launched a thorough investigation. Soon, promising findings from the forensic and crime scene teams helped unravel the mystery. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner concluded that the victim died from asphyxiation caused by ligature strangulation. Specifically, the hyoid bone in her neck was fractured and the soft tissues around the trachea were hemorrhaged, classic signs of pressure applied by a tightening object. There were no other fatal injuries, indicating the killer did not use additional weapons. The time of death was early dawn on September 25th. Moreover, the forensic report noted fibers and skin particles under the victim's fingernails, likely from the suspect's clothing or skin. This proved she fought fiercely before collapsing. These findings matched the scratch marks found on Tony Le, strengthening the theory of a struggle inside the bathroom. Further forensic analysis showed that the phone charging cable, the suspected murder weapon, contained DNA from both the victim and Tony Le. Among the evidence collected at the scene, one document drew particular attention from investigators. Michelle's divorce petition, prepared and ready to be filed with the court. This crucial clue pointed toward a potential motive. The proposed theory was that the couple's marriage was far less harmonious than it appeared, and Michelle's intent to pursue a divorce may have triggered Tony Le's violent jealousy. It sounded plausible, but to confirm it, investigators still needed a confession from the suspect himself. At the investigative office, Tony Le initially remained silent, but within minutes he broke down in tears and began confessing everything. In his first statement, Tony said that he and his wife had a heated argument earlier that dawn. He admitted that he had lost control out of rage and jealousy when his wife mentioned wanting to end the marriage. Tony recounted in detail how he followed her into the bathroom, grabbed the nearby iPhone charging cable, looped it around her neck from behind, and pulled tightly. After committing the act, Tony panicked, drove to his sister's house to confess everything, and then called the police. His entire statement was recorded, transcribed, and signed voluntarily. This became a powerful confession, as the suspect admitted guilt without coercion. However, to complete the full picture, investigators still needed testimonies from additional witnesses. Tony Le's sister confirmed that early on September 25th, her brother had come banging on her door in a frantic state before confessing to harming his wife. She added that Tony had always been a calm husband, but recently showed signs of stress and jealousy, suspecting his wife of infidelity. The victim's son told investigators that his mother had wanted a divorce for some time. He said his parents often argued about the business and finances of the nail salon. Notably, he confirmed that his mother had met with a divorce lawyer a few days earlier. Close friends of the victim were also interviewed. They said Michelle had confided that she had a new boyfriend and planned to leave her husband, though her friends were unsure how true it was. These statements aligned with what Tony Lay claimed on the night of the incident, that Michelle told him she had a new partner and was going to leave him. Thus, the motive of jealousy and fear of losing his wife became quite clear. Additionally, police reviewed neighborhood security footage to confirm external details. A neighbor's camera captured Michelle driving home at around 3:15 in the morning on September 25th, with her car's headlights turning into the driveway. Not long after, the camera recorded Tony Lay leaving the house at around 4 o'clock, likely when he went to his sister's home. There were no signs of any unfamiliar person nearby at that time. This perfectly matched Tony's confession. Furthermore, the victim's phone was examined, showing an unsent message draft to a friend from the night of September 24th. In it, Michelle wrote, "He is too jealous. I'm exhausted." Although the message was never sent, the data remained on the device, helping reveal her emotional state shortly before the tragedy. During the investigation, Tony Lay's attorney hired a psychological expert to assess his mental condition. The aim was to determine whether Tony had committed the act under severe emotional distress. The psychological evaluation concluded that Tony did not suffer from any severe mental illness, but did show signs of acute emotional disturbance. Specifically, at the moment of the crime, he entered a state of jealousy-driven frenzy, losing control for a short period of time. The expert noted that this was not a premeditated attack, but an impulsive one. However, under Minnesota law, this factor could not exonerate him. Police also acknowledged Tony's remorse and briefly considered whether the incident could have been an accident, but given the clear confession and forensic evidence, that possibility was swiftly ruled out. All clues pointed toward one single scenario, that Tony Lay, consumed by jealousy, killed his wife in the bathroom during the early hours of September 25th, 2017. From the suspect's confession, witness statements, and extensive forensic evidence, police were able to reconstruct the full sequence of the crime. On September 24th, 2017, Michelle left the Pen Nails Spa Salon late in the afternoon. She decided to attend a small gathering with a few friends to lift her spirits. At that time, Michelle was emotionally torn. She had met with a divorce attorney 3 days earlier and planned to have a definitive conversation with her husband about ending the marriage. At the gathering, there were reports that Michelle had met a male friend she felt drawn to, possibly the new boyfriend she mentioned to others. Although the relationship was only beginning, Michelle was ready for an independent life after marriage. That night, she gathered all her courage to tell Tony the truth. As for Tony Lay, he was home alone that night. Tony knew his wife was attending a gathering and felt uneasy and suspicious. In recent days, Michelle often came home late and barely spoke to him, making Tony sense something was wrong. Ever since her recent trip to Vietnam, he felt she had become increasingly distant. In the quiet house, Tony sat waiting, his mind spinning with jealous thoughts, where his wife was, who she was with, and why she still had not returned. Every ticking second on the clock only fueled the simmering fire of jealousy inside him. At around 3:15 in the morning on September 25th, 2017, headlights flashed outside the window. Michelle returned home later than usual. She gently opened the door, hoping her husband was asleep. But Tony Lay was still awake, sitting in the dark living room. Within minutes, the couple began arguing, their voices rising rapidly. Tony confronted his wife about what she had been hiding and whether she had someone else, which would explain her strange behavior recently. At that moment, Michelle decided to tell the truth. She openly said she no longer wanted to continue the marriage, that she had someone new, and she was ready to end the relationship. Those words stunned Tony. In an instant, rage, pain, and jealousy exploded inside the 55-year-old man. It was now 3:30 in the morning. After hearing her declaration, Tony rushed toward Michelle, his face tightened with anger, screaming and accusing her of betrayal. Terrified, Michelle ran into the basement bathroom and locked the door to escape her husband's fury. The small bathroom became her temporary refuge. Inside, Michelle stood trembling, her heart pounding. Outside, Tony furiously pounded on the door, screaming in a jealous frenzy. Losing control, he looked around for anything he could use to break in or restrain her. On the shelf near the bathroom door, he noticed Michelle's cell phone plugged in to charge. A thought flashed through his mind. Tony yanked the phone charger from the outlet. It was a thin cable, about 1 meter long, with 2 small plastic connectors. Ironically, a device meant for connection and communication was about to become a weapon to take a life. Inside the bathroom, Michelle heard the noise and cracked the door open to check. Suddenly, Tony shoved the door wide open. Standing before her was a man she barely recognized, eyes bloodshot, face twisted in rage, holding a cable in his hand. Michelle panicked and tried to escape, but it was too late. Tony Lay charged at her like a wild beast, using his strength to wrap the charging cable around her neck from behind. She tried to scream, but her voice was cut off as her windpipe was compressed. In less than a minute, Michelle's resistance weakened and then ceased entirely. She collapsed onto the bathroom floor, her body curled up in the corner of the shower. Only when Michelle lay motionless did Tony loosen his grip, letting the cable fall onto the cold tile floor. Around him, personal items were scattered, and the mirror was smudged with small streaks of blood from scratches on Tony's hand. A chilling silence filled the room. The frenzy dissipated, and Tony Lay stood panting, staring blankly at his wife's lifeless body. In his mind, he still seemed unable to comprehend what he had just done. At 3:40 in the morning, Tony Lay finally snapped out of his daze. Seeing the horrifying scene he had caused, he collapsed beside his wife's body. He shook her desperately, calling out to her in vain. As the realization of what he had done hit him, Tony was consumed by both fear and remorse. He began sobbing uncontrollably, shedding tears that came far too late. In that moment, the 55-year-old man understood he had lost everything because of a single moment of madness. Realizing his wife was gone, Tony struggled to decide what to do next. For a brief moment, the thought of ending his own life flashed through his mind as he stared at the charger cable. But then Tony thought of his children. In the end, he decided to turn himself in. First, he needed emotional support, and the first person he thought of was his older sister, the only family member living nearby. At around 4 in the morning, Tony Lay left the house and drove a few blocks to her home. He rang the doorbell, dazed, with small blood stains still on his clothes. When his sister opened the door, Tony immediately lunged toward her, hugging her tightly and breaking down in confession. At first, she believed he was speaking in panic and not thinking clearly. But when Tony fell to his knees begging for forgiveness, she realized this was a horrifying truth. The siblings held each other and cried in anguish. Once she regained her composure, Tony's sister urged him to call the police. After several hours of calming down and gathering courage, at nearly 8:30 in the morning, Tony Lay picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. That fateful call alerted authorities to his wife's death, marking the beginning of the legal process. By 8:43, Minneapolis police arrived at the scene and arrested Tony Lay. With sufficient evidence in hand, on September 26, 2017, just 1 day after the incident, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office officially charged Tony Lay. The indictment stated clearly that he had intentionally caused his wife's death and emphasized jealousy over her desire for a divorce as the motive. Bail was set by the district court at $1.5 million USD, reflecting the severity of the crime. Tony Lay was held at the county jail awaiting trial. His trial was held at the Hennepin County District Court. Due to the clarity of the case and his confession, prosecutors did not pursue a higher charge. However, the proposed sentence remained extremely harsh. The Office of Prosecutor Mike Freeman recommended a sentence of 306 months, equivalent to 25 years and 6 months, based on Minnesota's sentencing guidelines. In January 2019, Tony Lay unexpectedly changed course and chose to plead guilty instead of going to trial. During the plea hearing on January 10th, 2019, Tony Lay responded through an interpreter, admitting responsibility for his wife's death. This plea eliminated the need for a jury trial and allowed the court to move directly to sentencing. Tony's defense attorney, Ryan Gary, explained that they initially planned to argue a crime committed in a moment of emotional heat in hopes of reducing the charge to manslaughter. However, Tony insisted on pleading guilty, saying he wanted both families to suffer less. Perhaps after more than a year in jail, his conscience awakened enough to push him to face the truth and accept responsibility. The sentencing hearing took place on February 12th, 2019. The atmosphere in the courtroom was filled with sorrow and outrage. Representatives of the victim's family were allowed to speak in court. One by one, they tearfully described the tragic woman they had lost. A niece who called Michelle D pleaded through sobs for the court to impose the harshest possible sentence to bring justice for her aunt. The victim's brother also firmly insisted that Tony must pay a deserving price. Hearing their words, Tony Lay lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. He too was given a chance to speak his final words. In a short statement, Tony tearfully spoke in Vietnamese, expressing profound remorse and apologizing to his wife's family and his children. He said he loved his wife deeply but lost control, and that he would live with regret for the rest of his life. Several of Tony's relatives and friends submitted 16 letters requesting leniency, describing him as a good husband in the past and saying this act was an unusual outburst. The defense attorney used these letters to request mercy, asking for a 15-year sentence and arguing that Tony's actions were less severe than a typical second-degree murder. However, prosecutors and investigators strongly rejected this view. They emphasized that Tony Lay strangled his wife to death in a brutal manner, something far beyond a momentary loss of control. The prosecution pointed out that the prolonged pressure required to make the victim lose consciousness demonstrated clear intent to kill, not an accident. Moreover, after Michelle collapsed, Tony did not provide aid or call for help. Immediately, he left for several hours, showing utter disregard after the crime. Sitting on the prosecution's side, many members of the victim's family shook their heads upon hearing the defense's plea. They believed Tony deserved the full punishment for his cruel actions. After hearing both sides, Judge Chhoun entered deliberation before returning with the verdict. He announced that the court accepted the defendant's guilty plea to second-degree murder and would issue a sentence within the guideline range, with certain considerations. Judge Chhoun stated that Tony Lay's actions were extremely serious, but the court also recognizes his acceptance of responsibility and lack of prior criminal history. Ultimately, the court sentenced Tony Lay to 261 months in prison, equivalent to approximately 21 years and 9 months. This was the lowest end of the sentencing guideline for this charge. Upon hearing the sentence, Tony Lay burst into tears, while the victim's family appeared somewhat disappointed, believing the punishment was still too lenient. The judge explained that he had considered Tony's remorse and clean record, so he did not choose the highest penalty. Even so, it remained a very severe sentence. At nearly 60 years old, Tony Lay would spend most of the rest of his life behind bars. Under Minnesota law, he must serve 2/3 of the sentence in prison, about 14 to 15 years, before being eligible for supervised release for the remaining 1/3. Since Tony had been held in custody since 2017, that time would be credited toward his sentence. He is expected to remain in prison at least until around 2032 before he may be eligible for release. After the sentencing, Tony Lay appealed for a reduced sentence, arguing that 21 years was too harsh for what he claimed was an act committed in a moment of anger. However, in February 2020, the Minnesota Court of Appeals upheld the original sentence, affirming that the punishment imposed on Tony Lay was appropriate and not excessive. The appellate court emphasized that the severity of Tony's actions was comparable to other malicious homicide cases. With this ruling, Tony Lay's legal journey effectively came to an end. He must now serve the sentence handed down, with no further path of appeal. The case of Tony Lay concluded with a just punishment for the perpetrator, but its echoes continue to shock the Vietnamese community in Minneapolis. It was a heartbreaking family tragedy, the victim, a gentle wife who endured much emotional suffering, and the perpetrator, a husband consumed by jealousy who destroyed everything. On social media and in local news outlets, the story was widely shared as a stark reminder of the dangers of hidden domestic violence. Many readers expressed sorrow for Michelle, a beloved woman who contributed to her community, yet ultimately died at the hands of the person who should have protected her. The incident also reignited discussions about jealousy, control, and cultural dynamics within marriage. Some argued that the lingering mindset of a husband's authority over his wife in certain Asian households can fuel disaster when a man cannot accept his wife's independence or desire for divorce. And what about you? Do you think the sentence given to Tony Lay was appropriate? Share your thoughts in the comments below for Vietnamese Case Files. And if you found today's content compelling, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you won't miss future true crime stories. Goodbye, and see you next time.